In the quiet village of St. Mary Mead, a deadly supper unfolds at Benham Hall. A golden fruit tart, laced with strychnine, claims Eleanor Pritchard's life. But was it meant for her charming husband, Gerald? Miss Jane Marple and her Tuesday nightclub unravel a web of deception, jealousy, a secret will, and a household bound by fear and loyalty. As whispers of love and betrayal surface, one question burns: who turned a desert into death? Dive into a classic whodunit, where every clue counts. Chapter 1. The Gathering at St. Mary Mead. The soft glow of lamplight bathed Miss Jane Marple's sitting room in the quiet village of St. Mary Mead, casting gentle shadows on the chintz curtains and the polished oak furniture. A fire crackled in the hearth, its warmth a welcome contrast to the chill of the late autumn evening. Miss Marple, a slight figure with snow-white hair and a deceptively mild expression, sat in her favourite armchair, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically as she worked on a delicate pink shawl. Her eyes, bright and observant behind her spectacles, betrayed a mind far sharper than her frail appearance suggested. It was Tuesday, and the familiar ritual of the Tuesday nightclub was about to begin. The group, an eclectic gathering of friends and neighbours, had formed some months ago with a singular purpose: to share and solve mysteries that baffled the ordinary mind. Each member brought a tale, sometimes a local curiosity, sometimes a grim affair from afar, and together they unravelled the threads of human nature, guided by Miss Marple's unerring insight into the ways of the world. The room was already alive with the murmur of voices as the guests settled into their places. Dr. Haydock, a wiry man with a keen medical mind and a habit of tapping his fingers when deep in thought, lounged on the sofa, his sharp eyes scanning the room. Beside him sat Colonel Bantry, retired from the Indian Army, his ruddy face framed by a bristling moustache that quivered when he was excited. His wife, Dolly Bantry, plump and cheerful, perched on a cushioned stool, her love of gossip matched only by her delight in a good story. Across from them, sprawled in an armchair with a writer's careless elegance, was Raymond West, Miss Marple's nephew, whose modern novels and penchant for dramatic flair often clashed with his aunt's quiet wisdom. The clock on the mantelpiece chimed 7:30, and Miss Marple set her knitting aside, folding her hands neatly in her lap. "Well, my dears," she said, her voice soft but carrying, "who shall begin tonight?" Her tone was gentle, almost deferential, but there was a glint in her eye that suggested she was already anticipating the puzzle to come. Colonel Bantry cleared his throat, a sure sign he had something weighty to share. "I've a story for you," he said, leaning forward, his moustache twitching. "A nasty business happened not far from here, in much Benham. It's got the local police in a proper tangle, and I dare say it'll give us something to chew on." He paused, savouring the attention of the room. "It's about a deather woman, poisoned, they say, by a meal that wasn't meant for her at all." Dolly Bantry gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Poison, oh Arthur, how dreadful! Do tell us more." Her eyes sparkled with curiosity, though there was a hint of unease beneath her eagerness. Raymond West raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a sceptical smile. "Poison, eh? Sounds like something out of one of my novels. But go on, Colonel. Let's hear the details, and we'll see if we can't outdo the constabulary." Dr. Haydock, ever the pragmatist, folded his arms. "Poison's a tricky thing," he said. "Leaves, traces, points, fingers. If the police are stumped, there's likely more to it than meets the eye." "What's the setup, Bantry?" Miss Marple said nothing, her gaze fixed on the fire, but her lips twitched in the faintest of smiles. She had a way of listening that made others feel they were revealing more than they intended, and already her mind was sifting through the possibilities. Poison, she thought, was never merely a weapon. It was a statement, a betrayal dressed in subtlety. Colonel Bantry leaned back, warming to his tale. The victim was a Mrs. Eleanor Pritchard, wife of Mr. Gerald Pritchard, a retired solicitor. They lived at Benham Hall, a fine old place in much Benham. Wealthy couple, no children, bit of a strained marriage by all accounts. The night she died, they dined alone. Nothing fancy, just roast lamb and the usual trimmings. Finished off with a fruit tart. Mrs. Pritchard took ill right after dessert, collapsed in agony, and was gone before anyone could fetch a doctor. The autopsy found strychnine in her system, and the poison was traced to the tart. "Strychnine," Dolly exclaimed, her voice a mix of horror and fascination. "That's the stuff that makes you convulse, isn't it? How perfectly awful, indeed," said Dr. Haydock, his brow furrowing. "It's a brutal poison, acts fast, and leaves no doubt. But why the tart, and why her? That's the rub," Bantry continued. "Gerald Pritchard didn't touch the desserts. He never cared for sweets. The police think the poison was meant for him, likely the work of some enemy from his solicitor days, a disgruntled client perhaps, or someone with a grudge. But they've got no leads, no suspects worth the name. The case is at a standstill." Raymond West tapped his chin, his eyes narrowing. "A poisoned tart, meant for the husband but taken by the wife. It's almost too neat, isn't it? Like a stage play with a twist. I'd wager there's a lover or a secret fortune lurking in the background." Miss Marple's needles, which she had quietly resumed, paused for a moment. "It's curious," she said, almost to herself, "how often the simplest explanation is overlooked. In my village, I once knew a man who claimed he hated marmalade, yet he ate it every morning when his wife wasn't looking. People's habits, they're not always what they seem." The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling over them. Colonel Bantry chuckled. "You've a way of cutting to the heart of things, Miss Marple. So, what do you make of it? Care to take a stab?" At this one, Miss Marple's eyes met his, and for a moment there was a spark of something almost mischievous in her gaze. "I think," she said, "we shall need a few more facts before we can untangle this knot. But a poisoned meal, meant for one and taken by another. It's a very human sort of puzzle, isn't it? And human puzzles, Colonel, have a way of solving themselves if you know where to look." The fire crackled, and the Tuesday nightclub leaned in, eager for the game to begin. Chapter 2. The Tale of the Supper. The fire in Miss Marple's sitting room cast a warm, flickering light across the faces of the Tuesday nightclub, their expressions a blend of curiosity and anticipation. The air held a faint scent of woods and lavender, mingling with the delicate aroma of the tea Dolly Bantry was pouring from a silver pot. Miss Jane Marple, her knitting needles momentarily still, sat with her head slightly tilted, her bright eyes fixed on Colonel Bantry as he prepared to unfold the grim tale of the much Benham poisoning. The room, with its cosy familiarity, seemed an unlikely stage for such a dark narrative, yet it was precisely this contrast that made the club's gatherings so compelling. Colonel Bantry, his ruddy face set with purpose, leaned forward in his armchair, his hands clasped over his knees. "Now, then," he began, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to command, "I've given you the bones of the much Benham affair. but you'll want the meat of it. It's a devilish puzzle, and I'll lay out the facts as I know them, straight from the reports and a bit of local talk I picked up at the golf club. Mind you, the police have their theory, but it's thin as broth, and I suspect you latter especially. You, Miss Marple, might see something they've missed. Dolly Bantry, handing a cup of tea to Dr. Haydock, gave a little shiver. It's the poison that gets me, Arthur. Strychnine, of all things. It's so theatrical, like something out of a penny dreadful. Her tone was half horrified, half delighted, her eyes wide with the thrill of a real-life mystery. Dr. Haydock, accepting the tea with a nod, frowned thoughtfully. Theatrical, perhaps, but effective, he said. Strychnine's no amateurs. Choice, it's fast, unmistakable, and leaves a trail a competent pathologist can't miss. Whoever used it wanted the death to be noticed. That's what puzzles me, why choose a poison that screams murder. Raymond West, lounging with one leg crossed over the other, twirled a pencil between his fingers. It's a statement, isn't it? A bold one. Poison meant for the husband, taken by the wife. Fit's got all the makings of a tragedy with a twist. But let's have the details, Colonel. Who are these Pritchards, and what happened that night? Miss Marple said nothing, her gaze soft but intent, as if she were already weaving a pattern from the threads of the story yet to be told. Her hands resumed their knitting, the faint click of the needles a steady undercurrent to the conversation. She had a way of listening that seemed to draw out the truth, even from those who thought they were merely recounting facts. Colonel Bantry cleared his throat, settling into his narrative. The Pritchards, Gerald and Eleanor, were a couple of some standing in much Benham, living at Benham Hall, a Georgian pile with more rooms than they knew what to do with. Gerald, about 45, was a solicitor before he retired early, made a tidy fortune handling estates and investments for the county's gentry. Handsome chap, smooth-talking, the sort who could charm a snake out of its basket. Eleanor, a year or two younger, came from money. Her father was a textile magnate up north. She was striking in her way, dark-haired, sharp-featured, but with a tongue that could cut glass. They'd been married 15 years, no children, and the local gossip was that the marriage had gone sour, though they kept up appearances. He paused, reaching for his tea, and took a sip before continuing. The night it happened was a Tuesday, much like this one, 3 weeks ago. October 21st, to be precise. The Pritchards were dining alone, no guests, which was unusual for them. They often had company, being the sort who liked to show off their wealth. The menu was simple but well done. Roast lamb with rosemary, mashed potatoes with cream, glazed carrots, and for dessert, a fruit tart apple and blackberry, I believe, with a custard topping. Mrs. Baxter, their cook, prided herself on her pastries, and by all accounts, the tart was a masterpiece. Dolly Bantry leaned forward, her cup poised halfway to her lips, and that's where the poison was, in the tart. How perfectly ghastly. To think something so delicious turned deadly. Exactly, Bantry said, nodding. The meal went smoothly enough, as far as anyone knows. Gerald and Eleanor ate in the dining room, served by the maid, a young girl named Lily Carter. They had their usual bottle of claret, and there was no sign of trouble until the dessert was brought out. Eleanor took a portion of the tart, quite a generous one, they say, and ate it eagerly. Gerald, though, passed on it, said he wasn't fond of sweets, which was no secret in the household. Within 10 minutes, Eleanor was in distress. She clutched at her throat, her face contorted, and before Gerald could even call for help, she collapsed, writhing on the floor. By the time Dr. Simmons, the local physician, arrived, she was dead. Dr. Haydock's fingers stopped their restless tapping. 10 minutes, he mused. That fits with strychnine. It's absorbed quickly, especially on a full stomach. The convulsions, the agonite's a horrific way to go. But the tart alone, that's precise. The poisoner had to know exactly where to put it. Raymond West's pencil stilled, his eyes narrowing. And Gerald didn't touch it. Not a crumb. That's convenient, isn't it? The intended victim just happens to skip the poisoned course. Smells like a setup to me. Colonel Bantry raised a hand, as if to temper the speculation. Hold your horses, Raymond. Let me finish the picture. The police were called at once, of course. The much Benham constabulary, led by Inspector Crane, took charge. They sent the remains of the tart to a laboratory in London, along with samples from the other dishes and the claret, just to be thorough. The results came back clear strychnine, and plenty of it, in the tart. Nowhere else, not the lamb, not the potatoes, not the wine. The poison was mixed into the custard topping, evenly, distributed so every bite Eleanor took was lethal. The amount was enough to kill a horse, they said, which rules out an accident. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, her expression unchanged, but her mind was clearly at work. A custard topping, she murmured. How interesting. It's so easy to stir something into custard, isn't it? And no one would notice a slight bitterness with all that fruit. Bantry glanced at her, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. Sharp as ever, Miss Marple. Yes, the custard was the perfect vehicle. But here's the crux of it. The police are convinced the poison was meant for Gerald. He's the one with enemies, they say. As a solicitor, he handled some messy cases, disputed wills, foreclosures, the odd shady deal. There's talk of a client, a man named Hargreaves, who lost a fortune after Gerald advised him badly. Hargreaves made threats, though he's got an alibi for that night. The police think someone slipped the poison into the tart to get at Gerald. Not knowing he'd skipped dessert, Dolly Bantry set her cup down with a clink. But that's so risky. What if he had eaten it? Or what if they both did? Poisoning a dish like that, it's like playing Russian roulette. Risky, yes, Dr. Haydock agreed, but calculated. Whoever did this knew the household's habits, or at least Gerald's. His dislike of sweets wasn't a secret. The cook, the maid, they'd all confirm it. The question is, how did the poison get into the tart, and who had the chance? Colonel Bantry spread his hands as if presenting a gift. That's where it gets murky. The household at Benham. Hall is small but complicated. There's Mrs. Baxter, the cook, been with the Pritchards for a decade. She's a widow, loyal to a fault, but loves to talk village gossip, says she knows more than she lets on. Then there's Lily Carter, the maid, barely 19, new to the job and skittish as a colt. She served the meal and cleared the plates, so she was in and out of the dining room all evening. The gardener, Tom Reed, lives in a cottage on the Groundsea's a loner, keeps his own counsel, but he was seen near the kitchen that afternoon. Outside the staff, there's Gerald's sister, Miss Clara Pritchard, who lives in Much Benham and was a frequent visitor. She's a spinster, devoted to her brother, and didn't much care for Eleanor. And finally, there was a guest staying at the hall that week, Lawrence Redding, an artist, young and a bit of a charmer, hired to paint Eleanor's portrait. Raymond West leaned forward, his interest piqued. An artist, you say? That's a wild card. Any chance he was tangled up with the Pritchards romantically, I mean? A love triangle would spice things up. Bantry chuckled, but his eyes were serious. You're getting ahead of yourself, lad. Redding's a handsome devil, and there's talk Eleanor was taken with him, but nothing solid. The village whispers about her jealousy, though thought Gerald was too friendly with the local ladies. Whether that's true or just tittle-tattle, I can't say. What I can say is that no one in the household admits to seeing anything odd. That night, Mrs. Baxter swears the tart was fine when she left it to cool in the kitchen. Lily says she took it straight to the dining room. Tom Reed claims he was in his cottage, and Clara wasn't even at the hall during dinner. Reading was in his room, working on sketches. Dr. Haydock rubbed his chin. The kitchen's the key, isn't it? That's where the tart was prepared, where it sat before being served. Who had access? And when? Mrs. Baxter's domain, Bantry said. She's territorial about her. Kitchen, but it's not a fortress. The back door's often unlocked during the day deliveries, you know. And the tart was left on the counter for at least an hour while she was busy with the roast. Lily was running errands. Gerald was in his study. Eleanor was upstairs dressing. Redding was about, and Clara had popped in earlier to discuss some family matter. Even Tom Reed could have slipped in, though he's not one for the house. Miss Marple's voice, soft but clear-cut through the discussion. An hour is a long time for a tart to sit unguarded, Colonel, and strychnine's not something one finds in a spice rack. Whoever used it had to procure it, and that takes planning. I wonder, was there anything else unusual that day? A visitor, perhaps, or a delivery? Bantry frowned, thinking. Nothing in the reports, but the locals mentioned a peddler in much Benham that week, selling tonics and such. The police looked into him, but he was gone by the next day, and they found no trace of strychnine in his wares. Still, it's a point. Strychnine's not easy to come by unless you've access to a chemist or a rat-catcher's kit. Dolly Bantry clasped her hands. A peddler, that's so sinister. Do you think he could have been hired to leave the poison? Like in The Sign of 4, with the secret agent? Raymond rolled his eyes. Really, Dolly? You're leaping to Conan Doyle now. Let's stick to the facts. The poison was in the tart. Gerald didn't eat it. Eleanor did. The police think it was meant for him, but they've got no suspects. What's the motive? Money, revenge, passion? Colonel Bantry shrugged. That's the devil of it. Gerald inherits Eleanor's fortune, but he's already well off. Revenge fits better with the police's theories. Someone from his past, like Hargreaves. Passion, well, there's the gossip about Eleanor's jealousy, but it's all smoke. No fire. The police have questioned everyone, searched the hall, even dug into Gerald's old cases. Nothing sticks. Dr. Haydock leaned back, his tea forgotten. The method bothers me. Poisoning a tart is so personal. It's not a bomb or a bullet from a distance. The killer had to be close, had to know the routine. I'd bet my stethoscope it's someone in that household, not some shadowy client. Miss Marple's needles clicked once, twice, then paused. It's the tart that tells the story, isn't it? She said, her voice almost a whisper. A dish meant to be shared, yet only one ate it. In my village, I once knew a woman who baked a cake for her husband every Sunday, but she always cut the first slice herself to be sure it was perfect. Habits like that, they're a window into a marriage. The room fell silent, her words hanging in the air like a delicate thread. Colonel Bantry blinked, then laughed. By Jove, Miss Marple, you've a knack for turning a simple dessert into a clue. So, what's your take? Who's the poisoner? Miss Marple smiled, her eyes twinkling behind her spectacles. "Oh, I shouldn't like to guess just yet, Colonel. But a meal is more than food, isn't it? It's trust, expectation, routine. Someone broke that trust, and I fancy they did it with a very clear purpose. Shall we meet again next week, and perhaps learn a little more about Benham Hall?" The Tuesday nightclub murmured their agreement, each lost in thought, the mystery of the poisoned supper settling into their minds like a seed waiting to sprout. The fire crackled, and Miss Marple's needles resumed their quiet rhythm, as if marking the time until the truth would be revealed. Chapter 3. The Household at Benham Hall. The soft patter of rain against the windows of Miss Marple's cottage lent a sombre note to the gathering of the Tuesday nightclub. The sitting room, with its familiar comforts, the crackling fire, the chintz-covered armchairs, and the faint scent of lavender from a bowl on the sideboard, felt like a haven against the damp chill of the October evening. Miss Jane Marple, her white hair neatly coiled and her eyes bright with quiet alertness, sat in her usual place, her knitting needles moving with a steady rhythm as she listened to the murmurs of her companions. The pink shawl she worked on had grown a little longer since the last meeting, a silent testament to the passage of their discussions. The Tuesday nightclub had reconvened to delve deeper into the much Benham poisoning, the grim tale of Eleanor Pritchard's death by a fruit tart. Colonel Bantry's account of the fatal supper had left the group intrigued, each member turning over the sparse facts like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle scattered across a table. Tonight, the focus was on the household at Benham Hall, the stage, where this domestic tragedy had played out. Miss Marple, though silent for now, had already hinted at her interest in the people who moved through that grand house, their habits and secrets as telling as any fingerprint. Colonel Bantry, his moustache bristling with purpose, stood by the fireplace, warming his hands as he prepared to elaborate. "You've got the gist of the Pritchard affair," he said, his voice carrying the clipped authority of his military days. "Eleanor dead strychnine in the tart, police thinking it was meant for Gerald. But you, Miss Marple, you were keen on the household last time. Said we ought to look at the people closest to the crime. Well, I've done some digging, talked to a few chaps at the Much Benham Golf Club, got a bit more from the inspector's report. Let's lay out the cast of characters and see what we make of them." Dolly Bantry, nestled in a cushioned chair, with a cup of tea, leaned forward, her eyes alight with curiosity. "Oh, Arthur, it's like a play, isn't it? All these people in that big house, each with their own secrets. I can just picture it, dark corridors, whispered arguments. Who's in this drama, then?" Dr. Haydock, seated on the sofa with his legs crossed, tapped a finger against his knee, his medical mind already probing for inconsistencies. "The household's the key," he said. "Poisons an intimate crime. You don't slip strychnine into a tart unless you know the routines, the layout of the place. Let's have the details." Bantry, who was close enough to pull this off. Raymond West, Miss Marple's nephew, lounged in an armchair, his writer's imagination already spinning possibilities. He twirled a pen, his lips curved in a half-smile. "I'm betting on a motive we haven't seen yet," he said. "Money's too obvious. This feels personnel jealousy maybe, or a grudge nursed in secret. Give us the players, Colonel, and let's see who fits the villain's role." Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, her gaze resting on the fire, but her attention was wholly on Bantry's words. She had a way of seeming detached, almost dreamy, yet missing nothing, her mind sifting through the nuances of human behavior like a prospector panning for gold. The household, she thought, was where the truth lay, not in the grand gestures, but in the small, unnoticed moments that revealed the heart. Colonel Bantry cleared his throat, settling into his narrative with the air of a man delivering a briefing. Benham Hall's a fine old place, Georgian, with sprawling grounds and more rooms than a couple like the Pritchards needed. Gerald and Eleanor rattled around in it, keeping up the old traditions, dinner parties, charity bazaars, that sort of thing. But the household itself was small, tightly knit, which makes the poisoning all the trickier. Let's start with the staff, then move to the others who were close. He held up a finger, counting off the first. Mrs. Baxter, the cook. She's a widow, late 50s, been with the Pritchards for 12 years. A stout woman, proud of her kitchen, rules it like a general. Her roasts and puddings are the talk of much Benham, and she's loyal to the family, especially Gerald. But she's got a sharp tongue and an ear for gossip, knows every scandal in the village. The tart was her creation, and she's adamant it was perfect when she left it to cool. The police questioned her thoroughly, but she's got no motive. Why would she poison her employers? Still, she was in the kitchen all day, so she had opportunity. Dolly Bantry's cup clinked against its saucer. A cook. That's so sinister, isn't it? She could have stirred anything into that custard. But if she's loyal, why risk it? Unless, perhaps she was bribed. Bantry shook his head. No evidence of that. Mrs. Baxter's comfortable, gets a good wage, and her husband left her a bit of money. The police checked her finances, nothing out of place. But she's not above bending the truth to protect the family's reputation. Said Eleanor and Gerald had their tiffs, but nothing serious. That's worth noting. He raised a second finger. Next, Lily Carter, the maid. Barely 19, new to the job. Started just 3 months before the poisoning. She's a local girl, timid, all blushes and stammers. Her job was to serve meals, clean, and run errands. She brought the tart to the dining room that night, so she's a link in the chain. The police think she's too nervous to be involved, says she. Saw nothing odd, just did her duties. But she's young, impressionable. Could someone have pressured her? She lives with her mother in much Benham. No sweetheart that anyone knows of. No reason to harm the Pritchards. Dr. Haydock frowned. A nervous maid's the perfect pawn, he said. She's in and out of every room, unnoticed. If someone slipped her a vial of strychnine, she might not even know what she was doing. Was she questioned closely? She was, Bantry said. Inspector Crane leaned on her, but she stuck to her story, took the tart from the kitchen, set it on the table, cleared the plates after, cried buckets, apparently, said she liked Mrs. Pritchard, even if she was strict. But here's a tidbit. Village says Lily was sweet on Lawrence Redding, the artist. Nothing confirmed, just whispers. Raymond West's eyes gleamed. An artist and a maid. Now that's a plot twist. A love triangle, perhaps, with Eleanor caught in the middle. Keep going, Colonel. Bantry raised a third finger. Tom Reed, the gardener. Early 30s, keeps to himself. Lives in a cottage on the estate. He's a strong, silent type, good with roses, but not with people. He was seen near the kitchen the afternoon of the poisoning, delivering herbs to Mrs. Baxter. He claims he was in his cottage by evening, and no one contradicts him. No motive, no connection to the Pritchards beyond his wages. But he's a dark horse ex-soldier, bit of a mysterious past. The police searched his place, found nothing incriminating. Miss Marple's needles paused, her voice soft but clear. A gardener, you say? How curious. In my village, we had a gardener who knew every plant, even the poisonous ones. He once told me, strychnine comes from a seed, the nux vomica. Not that he'd ever use it, of course, but he knew its ways. Bantry glanced at her, impressed. You don't miss a trick, do you? Yes, strychnine's from a plant, though you'd need a chemist to refine it. Reed's got no such knowledge, as far as we know, but he's got access to the grounds, the back door. Could have slipped in. Still, he's a long shot. He moved on, holding up a fourth finger. Now, outside the staff, there's Miss Clara Pritchard, Gerald's sister. She's in her late 40s, never married, lives in a cottage in much Benham, a 10-minute walk from the hall. She's devoted to Gerald, always has been, but she and Eleanor didn't get on. Clara's a prim sort, all starch and scripture, and Eleanor's sharp tongue rubbed her the wrong way. She was at the hall the afternoon of the poisoning, helping Mrs. Baxter with some preserves family recipe, she said. Left before dinner, wasn't there when the tart was served. She's got no clear motive, but she's protective of Gerald. And there's talk Eleanor was planning to tighten the purse strings. Dolly Bantry gasped. A sister, oh, that's rich. Sibling loyalty can be fierce, can't it, do you think? She'd poison Eleanor to save Gerald from a bad marriage. Not likely, Bantry said. Clara's too proper for murder, and she'd have to get the strychnine somewhere. But she's no fool knows more than she lets on. The police think she's holding back, maybe covering for Gerald. Dr. Haydock nodded. Family's always complicated. If Eleanor was controlling the money, Clara might have resented her. But poison, that's a big leap for a church-going spinster. Bantry held up his final finger. Last, Lawrence Redding, the artist. 30, good-looking, bit of a rogue. He was staying at the hall for a fortnight, painting Eleanor's portrait. He's got a reputation charming, flirts with anything in a skirt. Eleanor was taken with him, or so the village says, and she wasn't subtle about it. Gerald didn't seem to mind. But there's talk, Eleanor thought, Redding was too friendly with Lily. Redding was in his room during dinner. Says he didn't go near the kitchen. No motive, unless you count Eleanor's jealousy, but he had the run of the house. Could have tampered with the tart if he wanted to. Raymond West leaned forward, his pen tapping his chin. Redding's my bet. He's got the charisma to pull it off, and if Eleanor was making a scene over him, maybe he wanted her out of the way, or maybe Gerald paid him to do it ever, think of that. Bantry chuckled. You've been reading too many thrillers, Raymond. Redding's a guest, not a hired killer. Besides, he's got no connection to strychnine. The police checked his belongings, paintbrushes and canvases. No poison, Miss Marple's voice, gentle but precise, cut through the speculation. An artist is an observer, isn't he? He sees things others miss, the way a person moves, the look in their eyes. I wonder what Mr. Redding saw at Benham Hall. Sometimes it's not what a person does, but what they choose not to say. The room fell quiet, her words settling like dust after a storm. Dr. Haydock rubbed his chin. You're thinking Redding's a witness, not a culprit. That's a new angle. But the poisoner's still the puzzle. Who had the means, the opportunity, and the motive? Colonel Bantry spread his hands. That's the rub. The kitchen's the heart of it, open to half the household that afternoon. Mrs. Baxter was busy. Lily was in and out. Clara was there earlier. Reed was nearby. Redding could have wandered in. Gerald himself was at the hall, though he says he was in his study. Eleanor was upstairs, out of the way. The strychnine had to come from somewhere, maybe a chemist, maybe an old estate Gerald handled. The police are chasing that lead, but it's slow work. Dolly Bantry clasped her hands. It's so tangled. Everyone had a chance, but no one stands out. What about the peddler you mentioned last time? Could he have sold the poison to someone in the house? Possible, Bantry said. But the peddler's a ghost left much Benham the next day. No trace. The police think he's a red herring. The real question is motive. Gerald inherits, but he's rich already. Clara might have hated Eleanor, but why kill? Reddings. Got no stake. The staff. Nothing to gain. It's a knot, I tell you. Raymond West grinned. A knot's just a challenge. I say we dig into Redding and Lily, there's a story there. Or maybe Gerald's not as innocent as he seems. What's his alibi, exactly? Solid enough, Bantry said. He was with Eleanor all evening, except for a few minutes in his study before dinner. No one saw him near the kitchen, but he knew the tart was coming. His dislike of sweets saved him, or so the police think. Miss Marple's needles clicked once, then stopped. Dislike of sweets, she mused. How convenient. In my village, there was a man who swore he never touched sherry. Yet I saw him sip it at a wedding when he thought no one was watching. People's dislikes. They're not always as firm as they claim. Colonel Bantry blinked, then laughed. You're a marvel, Miss Marple. Are you saying Gerald's lying about the sweets? That he knew the tart was poisoned? I'm saying nothing yet, she replied, her eyes twinkling. But a household is like a tapestry, every thread matters. The cook's pride, the maid's blushes, the gardener's silence, the sister's loyalty, the artist's charm, they all weave the pattern. I think, Colonel, we should learn a little more about their threads. Dr. Haydock nodded. She's right. The household's the key. We need to know their relationships, their grudges, who stood to gain and who was close enough to act. Dolly Bantry clapped her hands. Oh, it's thrilling. Like peeling an onion layer after layer. What's next, Arthur? Will you talk? To the inspector again. I'll try, Bantry said, and I'll keep my ears open at the club. Miss Marple, you've got a plan, haven't you? Care to share? Miss Marple smiled, folding her knitting. Only a thought, Colonel. People are never quite what they seem, even in a grand house like Benham Hall. Let's meet again, and perhaps we'll find the thread that unravels it all. The rain tapped the windows, and the Tuesday nightclub leaned back, each lost in the maze of Benham Hall, where a poisoned tart had turned a quiet supper into a deadly riddle. Chapter 4. The question of the tart. The rain had ceased, leaving the air in St. Mary Mead crisp and heavy with the scent of damp earth. Inside Miss Jane Marple's cottage, the Tuesday nightclub gathered once more, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the fire and the steady light of a pair of brass lamps. The sitting room, with its familiar comforts, floral cushions, a well-worn rug, and a small table bearing a tray of tea and biscuits, felt like a sanctuary, a place where the grim realities of murder could be examined with detachment. Miss Marple, her white hair gleaming under the lamplight, sat in her armchair, her knitting needles moving with their usual quiet precision. The pink shawl, now noticeably longer, draped across her lap like a silent partner in her thoughts. The group was eager to continue unraveling the much Benham poisoning, the death of Eleanor Pritchard, by a strychnine-laced fruit tart still vivid in their minds. Colonel Bantry's detailed account of the household at Benham Hall had painted a vivid picture of the players, Mrs. Baxter, the proud cook, Lily Carter, the timid maid, Tom Reed, the reclusive gardener, Clara Pritchard, Gerald's protective sister, and Lawrence Redding, the charming artist. Yet the heart of the mystery remained elusive. How had the poison found its way into the tart? And why had Eleanor, not Gerald, been the one to die? Tonight, the club turned its attention to the tart itself, the innocuous dessert that had become a deadly weapon. Colonel Bantry, standing by the mantelpiece with a glass of sherry in hand, surveyed the room with the air of a man about to deliver a crucial dispatch. "We've covered the ground at Benham Hall," he said, his moustache twitching slightly. "The Pritchards, their staff, their guests all pieces in the puzzle. But the tart, that's the thing. It's the murder weapon, plain as day, and yet it's got us all stumped. How did the strychnine get into it? And why didn't Gerald take a bite? I've got a bit more from the inspector's notes, and I've been chewing it over with a fellow at the Much Benham Club who knows the Pritchard's cook. Let's see if we can't crack this nut." Dolly Bantry, perched on a cushioned stool, clasped her hands, her eyes wide with anticipation. The tart, it's so dreadful to think of it, something so lovely, turned into a trap. I keep picturing it, all golden and tempting, with that custard hiding such a wicked secret. How could anyone do such a thing? Dr. Haydock, seated on the sofa with his arms crossed, nodded thoughtfully. "It's the precision that bothers me," he said, his voice measured. "Strychnine in the custard, evenly mixed, no trace anywhere else. That's not a spur-of-the-moment act. Whoever did this planned it carefully, knew the tart would be served, knew Gerald's habits. The question is, who had the chance to tamper with it, and when?" Raymond West, sprawled in an armchair with a notebook balanced on his knee, twirled his pen, his writer's mind already spinning theories. "It's a classic misdirection, isn't it? The police think the poison was meant for Gerald, but I'm not so sure. What if Eleanor was the target all along, and Gerald's dislike of sweets was just a convenient excuse? The tart's the key. Let's hear the details. Colonel, what do we know about how it was made? Who handled it? Who served it?" Miss Marple's needles clicked steadily, her gaze soft but piercing, as if she were seeing not the fire before her, but the kitchen at Benham Hall, the tart cooling on its counter, the hands that might have hovered over it. She said nothing, but her silence was a presence in the room, an invitation for the truth to reveal itself. Her thoughts, as always, were on the small human details, the routines, the glances, the unspoken tensions that so often betrayed a killer. Colonel Bantry took a sip of sherry, then set the glass down and began. "Let's start with the tart itself. Mrs. Baxter, the cook, made it that afternoon, October 21st, a few hours before dinner. It was an apple and blackberry tart, her specialty, with a short crust pastry and a custard topping poured over the fruit before baking. She's particular about her recipes, uses fresh fruit from the orchard, cream from a local dairy, eggs delivered that morning. She mixed the custard herself, baked the tart, and left it to cool on the kitchen counter around 4 o'clock. Dinner was at 7, so it sat there for a good 3 hours. Dolly Bantry shivered. 3 hours. That's an eternity for something to go wrong. Anyone could have slipped in and, oh, it's too horrible to think about. Not quite anyone. Bantry said, holding up a hand. The kitchen's Mrs. Baxter's domain, and she's fierce about it. But it's not locked, and the back door's often open for deliveries or for Tom Reed to bring in herbs. Mrs. Baxter was in and out that afternoon checking the roast, fetching vegetables from the pantry. She swears the tart was untouched when she last saw it, just before Lily took it to the dining room. Dr. Haydock leaned forward, his brow furrowed. 3 hours is a wide window, but the custard's the key. Strychnine was mixed into it, not sprinkled on top. That means it was added before baking, or at least before the custard set. Was the custard made separately, or poured straight into the tart? Good question, Bantry said, nodding. The inspector's report was clear on that. Mrs. Baxter made the custard in a cream, eggs, sugar, a touch of vanilla. She poured it over the fruit in the pastry shell, then baked it. The strychnine was found evenly distributed in the custard, which suggests it was stirred in before it went into the oven. If it had been added after baking, you'd expect clumps or patches, but the lab said it was uniform. Raymond West's pen tapped his notebook. So the poison was in the custard before it was baked. That narrows it down to the kitchen before 4 o'clock. Mrs. Baxter's the obvious suspect. She made the custard, but why would she do it? She's got no motive, unless we're missing something. Bantry shook his head. The police thought of that. They questioned Mrs. Baxter for hours, went through her kitchen with a fine-tooth comb. No trace of strychnine in her supplies, no suspicious purchases, no grudges against the Pritchards. She was fond of Gerald, respected Eleanor, even if she found her sharp, and she's proud of her cooking. Took it personally that her tart was used to kill. She's clean, or so it seems. Miss Marple's voice, soft but clear, broke the flow of speculation. A cook's pride is a powerful thing, Colonel. In my village, there was a woman who baked scones for the church fete every year, and she'd sooner die than let anyone tamper with her recipe. But a kitchen is a busy place, isn't it? People come and go, maids, gardeners, even family. I wonder who else was near that custard before it was poured. Bantry glanced at her, a spark of admiration in his eyes. You're getting at something, aren't you? Well, let's look at the timeline. Mrs. Baxter mixed the custard around 3, left it in a bowl while she rolled out the pastry. The kitchen was busy that afternoon. Lily was fetching water. Clara Pritchard was there for a bit, helping with some jam making. Tom Reed dropped off parsley and rosemary around 2:30. Lawrence Redding was in the house, though he says he stayed in the drawing room, sketching. Gerald was in his study, Eleanor upstairs. The custard sat in that bowl for maybe 20 minutes before Mrs. Baxter poured it into the tart. Dr. Haydock's fingers drummed on his knee. 20 minutes. That's enough time for someone to slip in, stir in the strychnine, and slip out. But strychnine's bitter wouldn't Mrs. Baxter have noticed, or smelled something odd. The lab report mentioned that, Bantry said. Strychnine's bitter, yes, but the custard had vanilla and sugar, and the fruit was tart and blackberries. A small amount might have been masked, especially in a hot kitchen with all those smells. Mrs. Baxter didn't taste the custard. Roshi never does. Says it's bad luck. She just poured it and baked it. Raymond West grinned. Bad luck, indeed. So we've got a window of opportunity, but who used it? Lily's the next link sheet took the tart to the dining room. Could she have added the poison at the last minute? Not likely, Bantry said. The strychnine was in the baked custard, not on top. Lily's role was simple. She carried the tart from the kitchen to the dining room at 7, set it on the table, and served slices. Eleanor took a piece. Gerald passed. Lily cleared the plates after and noticed nothing strange, though she was shaken when Eleanor collapsed. The police pressed her, but she's a mouser's. She just did her job. Dolly Bantry set her cup down with a clink. Poor girl. Imagine serving a tart and then watching someone die. But she's so young, could she'll be covering for someone. That artist, perhaps. You said there was talk about her liking him. Bantry nodded. There's gossip, yes. Lily's sweet on reading, or so the village says. But there's no evidence she did anything but serve the tart. Readying, for his part, claims he was in his room during dinner, nowhere near the kitchen. The police checked his things. No strychnine, no motive. He was painting Eleanor's portrait, got on well with her, even if she was a bit possessive. Miss Marple's needles paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. Possessive, she murmured. That's a word that keeps cropping up, isn't it? A wife possessive of an artist, a cook possessive of her kitchen, a sister possessive of her brother. It's like a thread running through the house, pulling people tight. Dr. Haydock glanced at her, intrigued. You're thinking of Clara Pritchard, aren't you? Gerald's sister. She was in the kitchen that afternoon, helping with preserves. Could she have tampered with the custard? Bantry considered this, rubbing his chin. Clara's a possibility. She was there around 3, stirring jam with Mrs. Baxter. She's a precise woman, methodical, knows her way around a kitchen. If she wanted to slip something into the custard, she could have done it while Mrs. Baxter was distracted. But why? She didn't like Eleanor, that's clear, but poison's a bold move for a woman like Clara. And where would she get strychnine? Raymond West leaned forward, his notebook forgotten. Maybe she didn't need to get it herself. What if Gerald supplied it? He's the one who benefits Eleanor's money. A fresh start. His dislike of sweets is too perfect. What if he planned it, used Clara as his hands in the kitchen? Bantry shook his head. The police looked at Gerald. His alibi's solid. He was in his study most of the afternoon, joined Eleanor in the drawing room before dinner. No one saw him near the kitchen, and he's no chemist. Strychnine's not something you pick up at the grocer's. Besides, he's playing the grieving widower to a teases. He loved Eleanor, faults and all. Miss Marple's voice was gentle but firm. Grief can be played, Colonel, like a part in a play. In my village, I knew a man who wept at his wife's funeral, yet married his mistress a month later. But let's not rush to Gerald. The tart tells its own story. It was made for 2, yet only 1 ate it. I wonder, was the poison meant to kill 1, or to spare 1? The room fell silent, her words sinking in like stones in a still pond. Dr. Haydock rubbed his chin. You're suggesting the target wasn't Gerald at all? That Eleanor was meant to die? That changes everything. It does, Miss Marple said, her eyes twinkling. But we mustn't leap too far. The custard, the kitchen, the hands that touched it there, the clues we have. Mrs. Baxter, Lily, Clara, perhaps Tom Reed or Mr. Redding, even Gerald. If he was cleverer than he seems. And the strychnine, where did it come from? A chemist, a garden shed, an old estate. These are the questions we must ask. Colonel Bantry set his sherry glass down, his face thoughtful. You're right, of course. The strychnine's a puzzle. The police are tracing it, checking chemists, old medical supplies, even Gerald's old cases. He handled some estates with odd inventories, could have come across it there, but they've got nothing solid yet. As for the kitchen, it's a revolving door that afternoon. Mrs. Baxter's distracted. Clara's there, Lily's running about, Reed's nearby, Redding's in the house. Any of them could have done it, but none stand out. Dolly Bantry clasped her hands. It's so maddening. Everyone's a suspect, but no one fits. What about that peddler you mentioned? Could he have sold the strychnine to someone in the house? A long shot, Bantry said. The peddler was in much Benham that week, selling tonics and liniments. The police tracked him down in the next county. No strychnine in his stock. No connection to the Pritchards. He's a dead end, unless someone in the house lied about meeting him. Raymond West grinned. I like the idea of a secret rendezvous. Maybe Lily met him, got the poison for Redding, or Clara, acting for Gerald. It's got a certain flair. Dr. Haydock shook his head. Flair's all well and good, but let's stick to the tart. The poison was in the custard, mixed before baking. That points to the kitchen between 3 and 4 o'clock. We need to know who was there, what they were doing, and what they saw. Mrs. Baxter's the linchpin. She's in charge, but she can't watch everything. Miss Marple nodded, her needles resuming their rhythm. A kitchen is a stage, isn't it? Everyone plays their part: cook, maid, guest. But someone stepped out of their role, just for a moment, to stir in death. I think, Colonel, we should learn more about that afternoon. Who spoke to whom? Who looked away? Who lingered a little? Too long. Bantry nodded, impressed. You've a way of cutting through the fog, Miss Marple. I'll see what more I can get from the inspector. Maybe a word with Mrs. Baxter or Lily. The club's got a few tongues wagging. 2 might pick up something new. Dolly Bantry clapped her hands. Oh, it's like a detective novel. I can't wait to hear what's next. Do you think it's Clara, Miss Marple, or that handsome artist? Miss Marple smiled, folding her knitting. I think, my dear, that the tart has more to tell us. It's a small thing, a desert, but it carries a great weight. Let's meet again, and perhaps we'll find the hand that held the spoon. The fire crackled, and a Tuesday nightclub leaned back, the question of the tart lingering in their minds like a shadow, waiting for the light of truth to dispel it. Chapter 5. A visit to much Benham. The late autumn sun cast a pale golden light over the rolling hills of the countryside, its rays filtering through the bare branches of elms and oaks as Miss Jane Marple and Dolly Bantry set out for much Benham. The air was brisk, carrying the earthy scent of fallen leaves and the promise of an early frost. Miss Marple, bundled in a tweed coat and a neatly tied scarf, sat beside Dolly in the Bantry's modest motor car, her gloved hands folded in her lap, her eyes bright with quiet purpose. Dolly, at the wheel, chatted cheerfully, her enthusiasm for their mission undimmed by the gravity of their purpose. They were bound for Benham Hall, ostensibly to pay a call on an old acquaintance of Miss Marple's, but in truth to probe the shadows of the Pritchard poisoning, a mystery that had gripped the Tuesday nightclub with its tantalizing complexity. The road to much Benham wound through hedgerows and past stone-walled fields. The village itself, a cluster of thatched cottages and a squat Norman church, nestled in a shallow valley. Benham Hall, the Pritchards' grand Georgian residence, stood on a rise just beyond, its red brick facade and tall windows imposing yet softened by ivy and well-tended lawns. Miss Marple, gazing out at the passing scenery, was already turning over the details of the case in her mind: the strychnine-laced tart, Eleanor's sudden death, Gerald's convenient aversion to sweets, and the household Mrs. Baxter, Lily, Carter, Tom Reed, Clara Pritchard, and Lawrence Redding, each a thread in a tapestry of suspicion. The question of the tart, so thoroughly dissected at their last meeting, had pointed to the kitchen, but Miss Marple knew that facts alone were not enough. It was the human heart, with its hidden currents, that would reveal the truth. Dolly Bantry, her cheeks flushed with the chill, glanced at her companion. I must say, Jane, it's terribly exciting, isn't it? Playing detective like this, poking about Benham Hall. Do you really think we'll find something the police missed? Oh, I hope we see that artist Redding wasn't it. He sounds like a character out of one of Raymond's novels. Miss Marple's lips twitched in a faint smile. Excitement is all very well, Dolly, but it's the quiet things that matter, small words, fleeting glances. In my village, I once solved a theft by noticing a woman's gloves were cleaner than they should have been. We must watch and listen, my dear, and let Benham Hall tell its own story. Dolly laughed, her eyes sparkling. You're a marvel. Jane, I'd never think of gloves, but I'll keep my eyes peeled, I promise. What's our plan? We can't just march in and ask Gerald if he poisoned his wife. No, indeed, Miss Marple said, her tone gentle but firm. We shall call on Mr. Pritchard to offer our condolences, as is proper. My old friend Mrs. Langley, who lives in much Benham, has kindly arranged an introduction. From there, we may speak with the staff, perhaps see the kitchen. People talk freely when they think you're harmless, Dolly, and two old ladies are rarely seen as a threat. The motor car turned onto the gravel drive of Benham Hall, the tires crunching softly as they approached the house. A butler, elderly and stooped, greeted them at the door and led them into a spacious hall adorned with portraits and a gleaming chandelier. Gerald Pritchard emerged from a side room, his appearance striking tall, with dark hair silvering at the temples, and a face that combined charm with a carefully cultivated grief. His suit was impeccably tailored, his handshake warm but brief. Miss Marple, Mrs. Bantry, he said, his voice smooth and measured. Mrs. Langley spoke of your visit. I'm honoured, though I fear I'm poor company in these sad days. Please, come into the drawing room. The drawing room was elegant, with high ceilings, silk draperies, and a marble fireplace where a fire burned low. Tea was brought, and Gerald sat opposite them, his expression one of polite sorrow. Eleanor's loss has been a blow, he said, his eyes briefly downcast. We had our differences, as all couples do, but she was the heart of this house. I can't fathom who would do such a thing, or why they'd wish to harm me. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her gaze soft but searching. It's a dreadful business, Mr. Pritchard. In my village, we've had our share of sorrows, but poison is so deliberate. You must feel terribly alone now. Gerald nodded, a flicker of emotion crossing his face. I do. The police are doing their best, but they've no answers. They think it was meant for me, some old grudge from my solicitor days, but I've racked my brain, and I can't think of anyone who'd go so far. Dolly, her sympathy genuine, leaned forward. It's awful to think of it happening here, in your own home. Your cook must be devastated, poor woman, having her tart used like that. Gerald's lips tightened, though his tone remained even. Mrs. Baxter's taken it hard. She's loyal, been with us for years. She blames herself, though I've told her it's not her fault. The police have questioned everyone, her, Lily, even Tom Reed. No one saw anything amiss. Miss Marple set her cup down, her voice gentle. A kitchen is a busy place, isn't it? I remember my own cook, years ago, always bustling about. Things get left on counters, doors left open. It's a wonder anything stays safe. Gerald's eyes met hers, and for a moment there was a sharpness in his gaze, quickly masked. Mrs. Baxter runs a tight ship. But yes, the kitchen's open to the household. I suppose anyone could have tampered with the tart. The police think it happened there, before it was served. They spoke a little longer, Gerald maintaining his role as the grieving widower with practiced ease. Miss Marple noted his polished manners, the way his hands remained steady, the absence of any tremor in his voice. He was, she thought, a man accustomed to control, and control could hide many things. When they rose to leave, she asked, almost as an afterthought, if they might thank the cook for the tea. A request Gerald granted with a nod. The kitchen at Benham Hall was a cavernous room, its stone floor scrubbed clean, its walls lined with copper pots and shelves of jars. Mrs. Baxter, a stout woman with flour-dusted hands and a face creased with worry, was rolling out dough at a long oak table. Her apron was pristine, her hair tucked under a cap, and her eyes, though tired, were sharp with pride. She greeted them with a cautious nod, clearly unused to visitors in her domain. Double quotes Mrs. Baxter, Miss Marple said warmly, "Your tea was delightful, and I hear your tarts are the talk of much Benham. It must be dreadful for you, this tragedy." Mrs. Baxter's shoulders stiffened, but her voice was firm. "It's a shame and a scandal, ma'am. That tart was my best work apples, and blackberries from the orchard, custard made just so. I left it to cool on that counter there." She pointed to a marble slab near the window, "and it was perfect. I'd stake my life on it. Someone meddled, and it wasn't in my kitchen, not while I was here." Dolly, peering around with unabashed curiosity, ventured a question. "But it was on the counter for a while, wasn't it? Could someone have slipped in? The maid, perhaps, or that gardener?" Mrs. Baxter's eyes narrowed. "Lily was in and out fetching things, but she's no sneak. Tom Reed brought herbs that afternoon, stayed by the door. Miss Clara was here, helping with jam, but she's family, not one to meddle. As for Mr. Redding, he keeps to the drawing room. I run a clean kitchen, Mrs. Bantry. No one touches my dishes without my say-so." Miss Marple nodded, her gaze drifting to the counter, the window, the back door. "It's a fine kitchen, Mrs. Baxter. I can see you take great care. Was it a busy afternoon, the day of the incident? People coming and going, perhaps?" Mrs. Baxter hesitated, then shrugged. "Busy enough. I was at the roast, then the vegetables." Lily ran to the pantry. Clara was stirring jam. Mr. Pritchard came through once, looking for wine from the cellar. I didn't watch the tart every second, but I'd have seen a stranger. It was one of the household, mark my words, though I hate to think it." Miss Marple's eyes flickered with interest at the mention of Gerald in the kitchen, but she kept her tone light. "Mr. Pritchard, you say? He must be a comfort to you all, keeping the house together." Double quotes Mrs. Baxter's lips softened. "He's a good master, ma'am. Heartbroken, he is. Mrs. Pritchard could be sharp, but he loved her. He's been kind, too. Me, always is." They thanked Mrs. Baxter and moved to the servants' hall, where Lily Carter was polishing silver. The maid, a slight girl with mousy hair and anxious eyes, started at their approach, her hands trembling as she set down a spoon. Miss Marple's voice was soothing, like a grandmother calming a frightened child. "Lily, my dear, we're just visiting, no need to fret. You must be so shaken by what happened, serving that tart, and then such a shock." Lily's eyes filled with tears, her voice barely a whisper. "It was awful, ma'am. Mrs. Pritchard, she was kind to me, mostly. I just took the tart from the kitchen, set it on the table. I didn't know. I didn't see anything wrong." Dolly, her sympathy overflowing, patted Lily's arm. "Of course you didn't, poor thing. But you must see so much. working here. Did anyone act oddly that day? The artist, perhaps. I hear he's quite charming. Lily flushed, her gaze dropping. Mr. Redding's nice, ma'am. He talks to me sometimes about his paintings, but he wasn't in the kitchen, not that I saw. I was busy fetching water, setting the table. Miss Clara was with Mrs. Baxter, and Tom brought herbs. Mr. Pritchard, he was in the kitchen for a bit, getting wine. I didn't think anything of it. Miss Marple's eyes sharpened, though her smile remained gentle. Mr. Pritchard in the kitchen, how thoughtful, fetching his own wine. Was he there long, my dear? Lily shook her head, her blush deepening. Not long, ma'am. Just a minute, maybe. He went to the cellar door, came back with a bottle. I was at the sink, didn't watch him. They spoke a little more, but Lily's answers were halting, her nervousness palpable. Miss Marple noted the girl's unease, the way her eyes darted to the door, as if fearing interruption. She was hiding nothing, Miss Marple thought, but she was afraid of what, or whom, was unclear. As they left the hall, Dolly steered the car toward Much Benham's village inn, where they hoped to find Lawrence Redding. The inn, a low-beamed building with a roaring fire, was bustling with locals, and Redding was there, seated at a corner table with a sketchbook and a glass of ale. He was younger than Miss Marple had expected, with tousled hair and a disarming smile, his paint-stained fingers betraying his trade. He rose at their approach, his manner easy but guarded. Miss Marple, Mrs. Bantry, he said, offering chairs, an unexpected pleasure. I suppose you've heard about the tragedy at the hall. It's cast a shadow over my work, I can tell you. Miss Marple's voice was warm, inviting confidence. It's a terrible thing, Mr. Redding. You were painting Mrs. Pritchard's portrait, I hear. She must have been a fascinating subject. Redding's smile faded slightly. She was complex, beautiful in her way, but demanding. Wanted the portrait just so, every detail perfect. She could be charming, then sharp as a blade. I think she liked the attention, but it made her jealous thought. I was flirting with every maid in the house. Dolly's eyes widened. Jealous. Oh, that's intriguing. Was she right? I mean, not to pry, but there's talk about you and the maid, Lily. Reading laughed, though there was an edge to it. Village gossip, Mrs. Bantry. Lily's a sweet girl, shy as a mouse. I talk to her sometimes. She's curious about art. But Eleanor saw rivals everywhere. She even accused me of eyeing Clara, of all people. It got tense, I won't lie. The day before she died, she tore into me, said I was leading Lily on. I told her it was nonsense, but she was in a state. Miss Marple's gaze was steady, her voice soft. A state, you say? That must have been difficult, Mr. Redding, for a guest in the house. Were you at the hall that afternoon, when the tart was made? Redding shook his head. I was in the drawing room, sketching. Kept out of the kitchen, Mrs. Baxter's particular about her space. I saw Clara there earlier, helping with something, and Lily running about. Gerald passed through once, but I didn't pay much mind. I was focused on my work. They chatted a little longer, Redding's charm returning as he described his travels and his art. But Miss Marple noted his quick glances, the way his fingers tightened on his glass when Eleanor's name was mentioned. He was not lying, she thought, but he was choosing his words with care. As they drove back to St. Mary Mead, Dolly was bubbling with excitement. Jane, wasn't that thrilling? Gerald so polished, but I didn't quite trust him, and Mrs. Baxter's such pride. Lily's scared of her own shadow, and Redding's hiding something. I'd bet my hat on it. What did you make of it all? Miss Marple gazed out at the darkening fields, her mind sifting through the day's observations. It's the kitchen, Dolly, that holds the secret. Gerald in the kitchen, fetching wine, a small thing. But it doesn't fit. Mrs. Baxter's pride, Lily's fear, Redding's caution, they're all pieces of the same puzzle. In my village, I once knew a man who claimed he never went near the larder, yet I found crumbs on his coat. Small things betray us, my dear. Dolly glanced at her, awestruck. You think Gerald did it, don't you? Oh, Jane, you're brilliant. What's next? Miss Marple smiled, her eyes twinkling. Next, we tell the Tuesday nightclub what we've learned. And we watch, Dolly. The truth is there, in the small things, waiting to be seen. The car hummed along, carrying them back to St. Mary Mead, where the mystery of Benham Hall grew, ever more intricate, its shadows deepening with each new revelation. Chapter 6. The artist's secret. The twilight of late October draped St. Mary Mead in a gentle gloom, the village's cottages glowing with lamplight as the Tuesday nightclub convened once more in Miss Jane Marple's cosy sitting room. The fire crackled merrily, casting dancing shadows on the walls adorned with faded watercolors and a single framed photograph of Miss Marple's nephew as a boy. The air carried the comforting scent of freshly brewed tea and the faintest hint of beeswax. From the polished furniture, Miss Marple, her white hair neatly coiled and her eyes alight with quiet acuity, sat in her accustomed armchair, her knitting needles moving with their familiar rhythm. The pink shawl, now a cascade of soft wool across her lap, seemed a silent witness to the unfolding mystery of the much Benham poisoning. The club's recent discussions had deepened their fascination with the death of Eleanor Pritchard, felled by a strychnine-laced fruit tart at Benham Hall. Miss Marple and Dolly Bantry's visit to much Benham had yielded tantalizing glimpses into the household. Gerald Pritchard's polished grief, Mrs. Baxter's fierce pride, Lily Carter's nervous reticence, and Lawrence Redding's guarded charm. The tart, with its poisoned custard, remained the pivot of the mystery, but the human currents swirling around it, jealousy, loyalty, fear, were beginning to form a pattern in Miss Marple's mind. Tonight, the focus turned to Lawrence Redding, the artist whose presence at Benham Hall had stirred whispers of scandal and suspicion. Colonel Bantry, standing by the fireplace with his hands clasped behind his back, surveyed the group with the air of a general briefing his troops. His mustache quivered slightly, a sign of his eagerness to share new insights. "Well, now," he began, his voice resonant with authority. "You've heard about Miss Marple and Dolly's jaunt to much Benham, and a fine bit of sleuthing it was. They've given us a clearer picture of Benham Hall, but there's more to dig into, especially about that artist fellow, Reading. I've had a word with a chap at the Much Benham Club who knows him, and I've got a few tidbits from the inspector's latest notes. Redding's a slippery one, and I reckon he's worth a closer look." Dolly Bantry, nestled in a chintz-covered chair with a cup of tea, leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Oh, Arthur, he's fascinating, isn't he? So charming. But there's something about him, I felt it at the inn. Like he's playing a part. Jane, you noticed it too, didn't you? The way he talked about Eleanor, so careful, as if he was hiding something." Dr. Haydock, seated on the sofa with his legs crossed, tapped a finger against his chin, his medical mind probing for clarity. "Redding's an outsider in that house, which makes him interesting," he said. "He's got no clear motive, but he's close to the action painting, Eleanor's portrait, charming the staff, stirring up jealousy. If he's hiding something, it could be a clue to the poisoner's identity. What's the new information? Bantry. Raymond West, lounging in an armchair with a notebook balanced on his knee, twirled his pen, his writer's imagination already weaving dramatic possibilities. I've said it before, Reddings. My bet for a twist, he declared. He's got the flair for it, the kind of man who could charm his way out of trouble or into it. Maybe he's not the killer, but I'd wager he knows more than he's letting on. Lay it out. Colonel Watts, the artist's secret. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, her gaze resting on the fire, but her attention was wholly on Bantry's words. She had a way of listening that seemed to draw out the essence of a story, her mind sifting through the nuances of human behavior like a jeweler examining a gem. Reading, she thought, was a catalyst, his presence at Benham Hall stirring tensions that might otherwise have remained dormant. Her visit to Much Benham had left her with a sense of his careful reticence, and she was eager to learn what new light might be shed on his role. Colonel Bantry cleared his throat, warming to his narrative. Let's set the stage first. Lawrence, Reading, 30 years old, is a painter with a bit of a name in artistic circles' portraits, mostly for the well-to-do. He's got a knack for flattery, which helps with clients like Eleanor Pritchard, who wanted a grand likeness to hang in the hall. He arrived at Benham Hall a fortnight before the poisoning, hired by Eleanor herself, and stayed as a guest, which gave him the run of the place. He's described as handsome tousled hair, quick smile, a touch of the bohemian, the sort who turns heads, and not just the ladies. The village gossips love him, but they also suspect him of what? They're not sure. He paused, reaching for a biscuit from the tray, and continued. Miss Marple and Dolly met him at the Much Benham Inn, and their account tallies with what I've heard. Redding's charming, but guarded, especially about Eleanor. He admitted she was possessive, accused him of flirting with Lily Carter, the maid, and even Clara Pritchard, which he laughed off. But here's the new bit. My contact at the club, a fellow named Travers who's dabbled in art, says Redding's got a reputation beyond Much Benham. He's known for getting too close to his clients' wives, daughters, anyone who'll sit for him. There's a story from 2 years ago, in Bath, where a merchant's wife fell for him, caused a scandal. Redding left town in a hurry, and the husband threatened legal action. Nothing came of it, but it's a pattern. Dolly Bantry gasped, her cup clinking against its saucer. A scandal? Oh, that's deliciously wicked. Do you think Eleanor was smitten with him? And Gerald, did he know? Maybe he poisoned the tart to get rid of a rival. Bantry held up a hand, tempering her enthusiasm. Hold on, Darlie, there's no proof Eleanor and Redding were anything but client and artist, though her jealousy suggests she felt something. Gerald, by all accounts, was amused by her fixation, not threatened. But Redding's past makes you wonder, what was he really doing at Benham Hall? Was he just painting, or was he stirring the pot? Dr. Haydock frowned, his fingers stilling. A pattern of entanglement could be motive, he said. If Eleanor was infatuated, she might have pressed him to far demanded more than a portrait. Redding's a guest, dependent on the Pritchards' hospitality. If she threatened to ruin him, or if Gerald got wind of something, he might have acted to protect himself. But poison, that's a stretch for an artist. Raymond West leaned forward, his pen tapping his notebook. Not if he's clever. Readings. An observer, like Aunt Jane said. He'd know the household's routines, Mrs. Baxter's kitchen, Lily's errands, Gerald's habits. He could have slipped into the kitchen, stirred strychnine into the custard. Maybe he meant to kill Eleanor to stop her jealousy, Or even Gerald, if he thought Gerald was onto him. What's his alibi for that afternoon? Bantry nodded, consulting a small notebook he'd pulled from his pocket. The afternoon of the poisoning, reading says he was in the drawing room, sketching from about 2 until dinner at 7. He claims he didn't go near the kitchen. Mrs. Baxter doesn't like visitors, and he respected that. Lily saw him in the drawing room around 3, and Clara Pritchard passed through about the same time, confirming he was there. But the drawing room's not far from the kitchen, quick walk down a corridor. He could have slipped out for a minute, especially when Mrs. Baxter was busy with the roast. Miss Marple's needles paused, her voice soft but precise. A minute is all it takes, isn't it? In my village, I once knew a young man who stole a pie from a windowsill in the time it took his mother to turn her back. But Mr. Redding, he's a guest, not a thief. If he went to the kitchen, he'd need a reason, or he'd risk being noticed. What did he say about the household, Colonel? Did he speak of anyone besides Eleanor? Bantry glanced at her, impressed by her knack for cutting to the core. You're right to ask. Redding's been chatty with the police, but careful. He described the household as tensilina, and Gerald had their spats, nothing violent, but sharp words. He said Lily was sweet but nervous, always jumping at shadows. Mrs. Baxter he called a tyrant in her kitchen, but he admired her skill. Clara he found cold, too devoted to Gerald for her own good. Tom Reed, the gardener, he barely knew, said he was a shadow, always outside. But here's the interesting bit. Redding told the inspector he overheard a row between Eleanor and Gerald the morning of the poisoning in the library. Eleanor was accusing Gerald of being too friendly with a widow in Much Benham, a Mrs. Langley, no relation to your friend, Miss Marple. Gerald laughed it off, but Redding said Eleanor was furious, threatened to cut him out of her will. Dolly. Bantry's eyes widened. A will, that's a motive, isn't it? If Eleanor was going to disinherit Gerald, maybe he poisoned her to stop it. Or maybe Redding's lying, throwing suspicion on Gerald to cover his own tracks. Dr. Haydock rubbed his chin. A will changes things. Money's always a strong pull. But Redding, overhearing this why, mention it. If he's the poisoner, he'd keep quiet. Unless he's playing a deeper game, pointing the police at Gerald to deflect from himself. Raymond West grinned. That's what I like about him, he's got layers. Maybe he's not the killer, but he's stirring the pot, just like you said, Colonel. What else do we know about his movements that day? Anyone see him near the kitchen? Bantry flipped a page in his notebook. Not directly. Mrs. Baxter says he never came to the kitchen, and Lily backs her up. But Clara Pritchard told the police she saw Redding in the corridor near the kitchen around 3:30, carrying a sketchbook. He said he was looking for better light, but the corridor leads to the back door and the kitchen. It's not proof, but it puts him closer than he admits. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed slightly, her voice thoughtful. A sketchbook is a convenient prop, isn't it? In my village, there was a boy who carried a book everywhere, said he was studying, but he was really spying on his neighbours. Mr. Redding's an artist, he sees things, notices details. I wonder what he noticed that he's not telling. Bantry nodded, warming to the thread. That's the crux of it, Redding's holding something back. The inspector thinks so too. They pressed him about his past, the bath scandal, and he got cagey. Admitted he's had misunderstandings with clients before, but swore he kept things professional with Eleanor. The police searched his room at the whole paints, brushes, canvases, a few letters from admirers, but no strychnine, no incriminating. Notes, still. His story about the row in the library, it's the only real lead on motive, and it points to Gerald, not him. Dr. Haydock leaned back, his brow furrowed. Let's think this through. Redding's in the house, knows the routines. He's got no clear motive to kill Eleanor, unless her jealousy was more threatening than he lets on. But he's got opportunity a minute in the kitchen, while Mrs. Baxter's distracted. The strychnine's the sticking point. Where did it come from? He's an artist, not a chemist. Could he have gotten it from someone else in the house? Benham shrugged. The police are stumped on the strychnine. They've checked chemists, old estates Gerald handled, even Tom Reed's garden shed. There's a theory it came from a medical supply, maybe from one of Gerald's old clients, but it's thin. Redding's got no known access to it, unless he's hiding a connection we don't know about. Dolly Bantry set her cup down, her voice eager. What about Lily? There's talk she's sweet on Redding. Could she have helped him? Maybe he charmed her into getting the poison, or slipping it into the custard. Bantry shook his head. Lily's too timid for that, and the police found no link between her and Redding beyond a few kind words. She's scared stiff, says she. Only served the tart, didn't touch the custard. But Redding's effect on the household, that's worth noting. Eleanor's jealousy, Lily's blushes, even Clara's disapproval, it all circles back to him. He's like a stone dropped in a pond, sending ripples everywhere. Raymond West tapped his pen, his eyes gleaming. Ripples, exactly. Redding's not the killer, I'm starting to think, but he's the spark. He's seen something, or he's protecting someone. Maybe he knows who got the strychnine, or why Eleanor was so angry. What's his relationship with Gerald? Any tension? There, Bantry consulted his notebook again. No overt tension. Reading, says Gerald, was friendly, paid for the portrait, even joked about Eleanor's fussiness. But the library row suggests Gerald wasn't as carefree as he seems. If Eleanor was serious about the will, Gerald had reason to act fast. Redding's the one who brought it up, which makes him either a witness or a manipulator. Miss Marple. Needles clicked once, then stopped. A witness, she murmured, or a mirror. People like Mr. Redding reflect what others want to see: charm, talent, romance. But they also see things others miss. In my village, there was a painter who came to sketch the church, and he noticed a crack in the wall no one else saw. It saved the tower from falling. I wonder what crack Mr. Redding saw at Benham Hall. The room fell silent, her words settling like a soft mist. Dr. Haydock nodded slowly. You're saying Redding's a key, but not the lock. He's got information, maybe. About Gerald, maybe about the poison. But how do we get it out of him? Bantry rubbed his chin. That's the trick. The police have tried, but he slicked his just enough to seem helpful, not enough to incriminate himself. My contact says he's planning to leave much Benham soon, finish the portrait elsewhere. If he's got a secret, he might take it with him. Dolly Bantry clasped her hands. Oh, we can't let him slip away. Jane, you've got to talk to him again. You've a way of making people talk, like you did with Lily. Maybe he'll let something slip. Miss Marple smiled, folding her knitting. Perhaps, Dolly, but secrets are like shadows, they show best in the right light. Mr. Redding's secret, whatever it is tied to the house, to Eleanor's jealousy, Gerald's calm, the tart on the counter. We must keep watching, listening. The truth is there, in the small things. Colonel Bantry set his notebook down, his face thoughtful. You're a marvel, Miss Marple. I'll see if I can get more from the inspector, maybe. A word with Reading before he leaves. The club's buzzing with talk. Someone might have Heard something new. Raymond West grinned. I'm sticking with my theory readings, the spark, but Gerald's the fire. That Will business is too juicy to ignore. What's next, Aunt Jane? Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. Next, we let the ripples spread. The artist's secret is part of the pattern, but not the whole. Let's meet again, and perhaps we'll find the thread that ties it all together. The fire crackled, and the Tuesday nightclub leaned back, the mystery of Benham Hall deepening with each revelation. The artist's secret, a tantalizing clue in a puzzle that grew ever more intricate. Chapter 7. Clara's Confession. The evening air in St. Mary Mead carried a sharp bite. The first true hint of winter settling over the village as the Tuesday nightclub gathered once more in Miss Jane Marple's sitting room. The familiar warmth of the fire, the soft glow of lamplight on the chintz curtains, and the faint aroma of tea and shortbread created a cocoon of comfort against the chill outside. Miss Marple, her white hair gleaming like a halo, sat in her armchair, her knitting, needles weaving their steady rhythm through the pink shawl that now spilt generously across her lap. Her eyes, bright and piercing behind her spectacles, held a quiet intensity, as if she were already tracing the threads of the much Benham mystery through the labyrinth of human motives. The club's fascination with the poisoning of Eleanor Pritchard had deepened with each meeting. The strychnine-laced tart a grim centerpiece around which swirled a cast of suspects: Gerald Pritchard, the charming widower; Mrs. Baxter, the proud cook; Lily Carter, the nervous maid; Tom Reed, the taciturn gardener; Lawrence Redding, the enigmatic artist; and Clara Pritchard, Gerald's devoted sister. Miss Marple and Dolly Bantry's visit to Benham Hall had revealed glimpses of tension: Gerald's polished grief, Lily's fear, Redding's guarded charm, and the artist's revelation of Eleanor's threat to change. Her will had cast a new shadow over the case. Tonight, the focus turned to Clara, whose loyalty to her brother and strained relationship with Eleanor hinted at secrets yet to be uncovered. Colonel Bantry, standing by the mantelpiece with a glass of whiskey in hand, surveyed the room with the air of a man delivering a critical report. His moustache twitched, a sign of his eagerness to share fresh insights. "We've been at this much Benham business for weeks now," he said, his voice carrying the weight of command, "and thanks to Miss Marple and Dolly's sleuthing, we've got a clearer picture of Benham Hall. Redding's a slippery character, no doubt, with his tales of Eleanor's jealousy and that business about the will. But I've been thinking we need to look harder at Clara Pritchard, Gerald's sister. I've had a word with the much Benham vicar, who knows her well, and I've got a bit more from the inspector's notes. Clara's a dark horse, and I reckon she's got something to tell us." Dolly Bantry, curled in a cushioned chair with a cup of tea, leaned forward, her eyes alight with anticipation. "Clara, oh Arthur, she's so intriguing, isn't she? All prim and proper, but with that fierce loyalty to Gerald. I felt it when we met her. Jane, those sharp eyes, like she was weighing every word. Do you think she's hiding something?" "Dreadful." Dr. Haydock, seated on the sofa with his hands clasped, nodded thoughtfully. "Clara's devotion to Gerald is a motive in itself," he said, his medical mind probing for logic. If Eleanor was threatening to cut Gerald out of her will, Clara might have seen it as a betrayal of her brother. But poison, that's a bold step for a spinster. "What's the new information, Bantry? Does it point to her?" Raymond West, lounging in an armchair with a pencil poised over his notebook, grinned, his writer's imagination already spinning. "Clara's my new favorite suspect," he declared. She's got that quiet intensity perfect for a murderer hiding in plain sight. Redding's a distraction, but Clara's got access, opportunity, and a reason to hate Eleanor. Lay it out. Colonel Watt's Clara's confession. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, her gaze resting on the fire, but her attention was wholly on Bantry's words. She had a way of listening that seemed to peel back layers, her mind sifting through the subtleties of human behavior like a gardener tending delicate roots. Clara, she thought, was a woman bound by duty, her life orbiting her brother's. The visit to much Benham had shown her Clara's restraint, her clipped words, but also a flicker of something unspoken. Miss Marple's instinct told her that Clara's loyalty was a key, but whether it unlocked guilt or merely knowledge remained to be seen. Colonel Bantry took a sip of whiskey, then set the glass down and began. Let's start with Clara herself. Miss Clara Pritchard, 48, never married, lives in a neat little cottage in much Benham, a stone's throw from Benham Hall. She's the sort of woman who runs the church bazaar, organizes the flower, rota, and never misses a Sunday service. Prim, proper, with a spine of steel. She's devoted to Gerald, always has been, ever since they were children. Their parents died young, and Clara raised Gerald through his school years, scrimping to give him a start. He's her world, and she's fiercely protective, though she hides it behind that cool manner. He paused, warming his hands by the fire, and continued. Clara and Eleanor never got on. Eleanor was sharp-tongued, worldly, and Clara found her overbearing. The village says Clara resented Eleanor's control over Gerald's life, his money, his social circle. Eleanor's fortune was her own, inherited from her father, and she held the purse strings tight. Clara, who depends on Gerald for a small allowance, felt it keenly. The inspector's notes say Clara was at Benham Hall the afternoon of the poisoning, helping Mrs. Baxter with a batch of raspberry jammer family recipe, she called it. She left before dinner, wasn't there when the tart was served, but she was in the kitchen near the custard during that critical window. Dolly Bantry's cup clinked against its saucer. In the kitchen. That's suspicious, isn't it? She could have slipped the strychnine into the custard while Mrs. Baxter was busy. Oh, but it's so cold-blooded, a sister poisoning her brother's wife. Bantry held up a hand, tempering her excitement. Not so fast, Dolly. Clara's no obvious killer. She's methodical, not impulsive, and strychnine's a risky choice for a woman like her. But here's the new piece. The vicar, Mr. Henshaw, told me Clara's been troubled since Eleanor's death. She's been at church more than usual, lighting candles, sitting alone in the pews. He says she's wrestling with something, guilt, he thinks, or fear. And then there's this. The inspector learned Clara knew about Eleanor's plan to change. Her will. Eleanor confided in her, of all people, the morning of the poisoning. During a tense conversation at the hall, Eleanor said she was fed up with Gerald's flirtations and meant to cut him out. Leave her money to a distant cousin. Dr. Haydock's fingers stilled, his brow furrowing. That's a bombshell. If Clara knew about the will, it's a motive not for her, necessarily, but for Gerald. Did she tell him? If she did, Gerald had reason to act fast. But Clara herself, would she kill to protect her brother's inheritance? Raymond West leaned forward, his pencil tapping his notebook. That's the angle. Clara's not the type to poison for herself, but for Gerald. She'd do anything. She was in the kitchen, knew the tart was being made. Maybe she stirred in the strychnine, thinking it'd save Gerald's future. Or maybe she got it for him, let him do the deed. What's her alibi after leaving the hall? Bantry consulted his notebook, flipping a page. Clara says she went home after helping Mrs. Baxter around 4:30. She was alone at her cottage, no witnesses, until the next morning when her neighbors saw her in the garden. The police checked her place, no strychnine, no suspicious items, just hymenals and sewing. But her behavior's what's telling. The inspector says she's been evasive, especially about that conversation with Eleanor. She admitted Eleanor mentioned the will but claimed she didn't take it seriously, said Eleanor was always making threats. But the vicar's account suggests she's carrying a burden. Miss Marple's needles paused, her voice soft but clear. A burden, indeed. In my village, there was a woman who kept silent about her brother's debts, thinking she was protecting him. It ate at her until she confessed to the vicar. Miss Clara's devotion to Gerald is her strength, but it may also be her weakness. What did she say about the kitchen that afternoon, Colonel? Was she alone with the custard at any point? Bantry glanced at her, a spark of admiration in his eyes. You're sharp as a tack, Miss Marple. Clara told the police she was with Mrs. Baxter most of the time, stirring jam at the stove. The custard was in a bowl on the counter, waiting to be poured into the tart. Mrs. Baxter stepped out to the pantry for a moment maybe. 5 minutes and Clara was alone in the kitchen. Lily was fetching water and no one else was about. Clara says she didn't touch the custard, just kept stirring her jam. But 5 minutes is enough, isn't it? Dolly Bantry gasped, her hands clasped. 5 minutes. That's plenty of time. To stir in poison. Oh, Jane, do you think she did it? She's so proper, but those quiet ones are the worst, aren't they? Dr. Haydock rubbed his chin, his voice measured. It's possible, but strychnine's the sticking point. Where would Clara get it? She's not a chemist, doesn't garden, doesn't handle estates like Gerald. And why the tart? If she meant to kill Eleanor, she'd need to know Gerald wouldn't eat it. That points to Gerald's involvement, or at least her belief he'd be safe. Raymond West grinned, his eyes gleaming. Exactly, Clara's the perfect accomplice. Gerald gets the strychnine, tells her the plan, and she does the deed in the kitchen. Her loyalty blinds her to the sin. But this confession, what's she said, exactly? Has she admitted anything? Bantry shook his head, flipping another page. Not a confession in the legal sense, but she's dropped hints. The inspector pressed her about the will, and she got flustered. Said she didn't tell Gerald about Eleanor's threat because she didn't want to worry him. But the vicar says Clara came to him the day after Eleanor's death, asking about forgiveness for sins of omission, things left unsaid or undone. She wouldn't elaborate, but he thinks she knows something about the poisoning, maybe saw something she's keeping quiet. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed slightly, her voice thoughtful. Sins of omission. How telling. In my village, there was a woman who saw her neighbor steal apples, but said nothing, thinking it wasn't her place. It led to worse crimes, because silence can be as heavy as action. Miss Clara's silence. I wonder if it's to protect Gerald, or to protect herself from what she fears is true. Bantry nodded, warming to the thread. That's the crux of it. Clara's holding back. The inspector thinks she's shielding Gerald, but she's not lying outright. She confirmed she was in the kitchen, saw the custard, saw Gerald pass through. For wine, she even mentioned Redding in the corridor, which tallies with his story. But when asked if she suspected anyone, she clammed up, said it wasn't her place to judge. The vicar's worried she's not sleeping, he says, and she's been asking about divine judgment. Dolly Bantry set her cup down, her voice eager. Divine judgment. That's practically a confession. She knows something. Jane, maybe. She saw Gerald tamper with the custard. Or maybe she did it herself, thinking she was saving him. What do we do now? Dr. Haydock leaned back, his brow furrowed. Let's piece it together. Clara's in the kitchen, alone for 5 minutes with the custard. She knows Eleanor's planning to change her will, which threatens Gerald's future. Her own, since she relies on him. She's got opportunity, but no clear means, no strychnine. Motive's there, but it's tied to Gerald. If she's confessing to the vicar, it's likely guilt over knowledge, not action. She saw something, or suspects it, and can't bring herself to betray her brother. Raymond West tapped his pencil, his eyes gleaming. That's my theory. The witness, not the killer. Gerald's the one with the real motive. Eleanor's money, her control, maybe even this widow Redding mentioned. Clara's caught in the middle, torn between loyalty and conscience. But what did she see, and why? Not tell the police. Bantry shrugged, closing his notebook. That's the devil of it. The police have pressed her, but she's stubborn. Says she trusts Gerald, believes he's innocent. The inspector's tempted to bring her in for more questioning, but without evidence, it's a bluff. The strychnine's still the key. It came from who had it. They're checking Gerald's old clients, old medical supplies, but it's slow going. Miss Marple's needles clicked once, then stopped. A sister's love is a powerful thing, she murmured. In my village, there was a girl who lied to save her brother from a theft charge, even though it broke her heart. Miss Clara's love for Gerald is her shield, but it's also her burden. If she saw him in the kitchen, near the custard, she might convince herself it meant nothing. But her conscience, that's what's speaking to the vicar. Bantry glanced at her, impressed. You think she saw Gerald do it? That's a bold leap, Miss Marple. The police have no proof he was near the custard, only that he got wine from the cellar. Clara's the one who places him in the kitchen, but she says it was innocent. Miss Marple smiled, her eyes twinkling. Innocent until it isn't, Colonel. A man fetching wine doesn't linger by a counter, not unless he has reason. Clara's confession isn't words, it's her silence, her prayers, her fear. She knows more than she's said and is eating at her. But we mustn't rush to Gerald yet. The kitchen, the custard, the household, they all hold pieces of the truth. Dr. Haydock nodded slowly. You're right, Clara's the key, but not the lock. She's protecting someone, likely Gerald, but she's not the poisoner, Still the puzzlesome one brought it to that kitchen. Gerald's the most likely, with his old cases, but Clara could have been his eyes, watching the routine. Dolly Bantry clasped her hands. It's so tragic. Clara torn between her brother and the truth. Jane, you've got to talk to her. You're so gentle, you'd get her to open up, like you did with Lily. Miss Marple folded her knitting, her voice calm but firm. Perhaps Dolly, but we must tread carefully. A woman like Clara won't speak until she's ready and pushing. Her might close her heart. We need more lighten, Gerald, on the strychnine, on what Clara saw. The truth is like a seed, my dear, it grows in its own time. Colonel Bantry set his glass down, his face thoughtful. You're a wonder, Miss Marple. I'll see what more I can get from the inspector maybe. A word with the vicar, or Clara herself. The club's full of chatter someone might have heard. Something new. Raymond West grinned, closing his notebook. I'm sticking with Gerald as the mastermind, but Clara's the heart of it. Her confessions, the crack in the facade. What's next, Aunt Jane? Miss Marple's eyes gleamed behind her spectacles. Next, we wait for the seed to sprout. Clara's confession is a step, but the pattern's not complete. Let's meet again, and perhaps we'll find the thread that binds it all. The fire crackled, and the Tuesday nightclub leaned back, the weight of Clara's unspoken truth settling over them, a quiet promise of revelations yet to come in the shadowed halls of Benham Hall. Chapter 8. The Maid's Tale. The November dusk wrapped St. Mary Mead in a velvet chill, the village's lamplit windows glowing like beacons against the gathering dark. Inside Miss Jane Marple's cottage, the Tuesday nightclub assembled in the familiar embrace of her sitting room, where the fire cast a warm, flickering light across the floral cushions and polished wood. The air held the comforting scent of Darjeeling tea and the subtle tang of wood smoke, a quiet counterpoint to the grim mystery that drew them together. Miss Marple, her white hair neatly pinned and her eyes sharp with unspoken thoughts, sat in her armchair, her knitting needles weaving their ceaseless rhythm through the ever-growing pink shawl. Her presence, serene yet commanding, anchored the group as they delved deeper into the much Benham poisoning, the death of Eleanor Pritchard, struck down by a strychnine-laced fruit tart, had woven a complex web of suspicion around Benham Hall. Each meeting of the club had peeled back layers Gerald Pritchard's calculated charm, Mrs. Baxter's kitchen pride, Lawrence Redding's guarded allure, Clara Pritchard's burdened loyalty, and the elusive source of the poison. Miss Marple and Dolly Bantry's visit to much Benham had illuminated the household's tensions, and Clara's half-confessed knowledge of Eleanor's will had sharpened the focus on Gerald. Yet the truth remained elusive, hidden in the small, human details Miss Marple so deftly sought. Tonight, the club turned its attention to Lily Carter, the timid maid whose nervous glances and halting words hinted at a story yet untold. Colonel Bantry, standing by the fireplace with a pipe in hand, puffed thoughtfully, his moustache quivering with the weight of new information. "We've been at this much Benham puzzle long enough to know it's a tangle," he said, his voice steady with the authority of experience. "Clara's confession or lack of one points to Gerald, but we're still short of proof. Miss Marple, your nudge about the kitchen and those small moments has me thinking about the maid, Lily Carter. She's been in the background, serving the tart, scurrying about, but she's closer to the action than we've given her credit for. I've got a bit more from the inspector's latest report, and I spoke to a much Benham shopkeeper who knows. Lily's family, she's a quiet one, but I reckon she's got a tale to tell." Dolly Bantry, perched on a cushioned stool with a teacup cradled in her hands, leaned forward, her eyes wide with anticipation. "Lily, oh Arthur, she's such a mouse, isn't she? I felt so sorry for her at Benham Hall, all trembly and pale. But Jane, you saw it too, those nervous glances, like she was afraid of saying the wrong thing. Do you think she's hiding something? Maybe she saw who poisoned the tart." Dr. Haydock, seated on the sofa with his legs crossed, rubbed his chin, his medical mind sifting through possibilities. "Lily's position is critical," he said, his tone measured. "She's the one who carried the tart from the kitchen to the dining room, the last to handle it before Eleanor ate. If she's hiding something, it could be fear, not guilt. A maid sees everything, arguments, secrets. What's the new information, Bantry? Does it put her closer to the poison?" Raymond West, sprawled in an armchair with a notebook on his knee, twirled his pencil, his writer's flair undimmed. "Lily's the wild card," he declared. "She's too timid to be the killer, but she's perfect for a witness or an unwilling accomplice. Redding's charm, Gerald's control, Clara's loyalty, they all affect her. I bet she saw something in that kitchen, something she's too scared to tell, Spill it, Colonel. What's the maid's tale? Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, her gaze resting on the fire, but her mind was wholly engaged, tracing the delicate threads of Lily's role. She had noted the maid's fear during their visit to Benham Hall, the way her hands trembled, the quick dart of her eyes. Lily was no mastermind, but she was a mirror, reflecting the household's hidden currents. Miss Marple's thoughts lingered on the kitchen, the custard, and the fleeting moments when truth might have slipped through unnoticed. Colonel Bantry lit his pipe, the fragrant smoke curling upward as he began. Let's place Lily Carter in context. She's 19, born and raised in much Benham, daughter of a seamstress and a late farmhand. She's been at Benham Hall for 3 months, her first proper job, and she's still finding her feet. Timid, as Dolly says, but Silver serves meals, runs errands. Her role the night of the poisoning was straightforward. She brought the tart from the kitchen to the dining room at 7, served slices to Eleanor and Gerald, and cleared the plates after Eleanor collapsed. The police questioned her early on, but she was recrying, stammering, insisting she saw nothing odd. They wrote her off as too nervous to be involved, but the inspector's starting to think she's holding back. He paused, puffing on his pipe, and continued. Miss Marple and Dolly's visit stirred things up. Lily's reaction, those trembles. That fear caught the inspector's eye. He went back to her, gentler this time, and got a bit more. Lily admitted she was in the kitchen off and on that afternoon, fetching water, setting out plates. She confirmed Clara was there, helping with jam, and Tom Reed brought herbs. But the new bit, the one that's got the inspector's attention, is this. Lily says Gerald Pritchard was in the kitchen alone with the tart for a minute or two, just before she took it to the dining room. He claimed he was fetching wine from the cellar, but she saw him by the counter where the tart was cooling, not near the cellar door. Dolly Bantry gasped, her teacup nearly slipping. Gerald by the tart. Oh, Jane, that's it, isn't it? He slipped the strychnine in right then, knowing Eleanor would eat it. Poor Lily, seeing that and being too scared to tell. Bantry held up a hand, tempering her excitement. Not so fast, Dolly. Lily's story isn't proof yet, she says. Gerald was only there a moment, didn't touch the tart, just stood nearby. She was at the sink, washing dishes, didn't watch him closely. But she's terrified, says she didn't mention it before because she didn't think it mattered. And she's afraid of Gerald. The inspector thinks she's protecting herself. Maybe worried Gerald will sack her or worse. Dr. Haydock leaned forward, his brow furrowed. That's a critical detail. Gerald, near the tart, minutes before it's served, changes the picture. The strychnine was in the custard, mixed before baking, but could he have added more, or tampered with Eleanor's slice? Lily's testimony puts him at the scene, but her fear's the real clue. Why's she scared? Did she see something specific? Or is it just Gerald's authority? Raymond West's pencil tapped his notebook, his eyes gleaming. Lily's the key now. She's not the poisoner to Jittery for that, but she's the witness we've been missing. Gerald's the obvious suspect, with the will, motive, and now this kitchen moment. But why's Lily only speaking now? And what else did she see? Keep going, Colonel. What's her full tale? Bantry puffed on his pipe, consulting a small notebook. The inspector's report lays out Lily's movements that afternoon. She was in the kitchen from 2 to 4, helping Mrs. Baxter fetching water, peeling carrots, setting out cutlery. Clara was there until 3:30, stirring jam. Tom Reed dropped off herbs around 2:30, stayed by the door. Readying was in the drawing room, or so he says. Though Clara saw him in the corridor, Mrs. Baxter was at the stove, then the pantry, leaving the custard bowl unattended for short spells. Lily says the tart was on the counter, cooling, from 4 until she took it to the dining room at 7. During that time, Gerald came through around 6, she thinks, saying he needed wine. The cellar doors at the far end of the kitchen. But Lily saw him pause by the counter, near the tart, before heading to the cellar. Miss Marple's needles paused, her voice soft but precise. A pause, you say? How curious. In my village, there was a boy who paused by a sweet jar every time he passed the shop, though he swore he never took a thing. It's the pause that tells, Colonel. What did Lily say about Mr. Pritchard's manner? Was he hurried or calm? Bantry glanced at her, a spark of admiration in his eyes. You've a knack for the small things, Miss Marple, Lily said. Gerald was calm, not rushed. He smiled at her, said something about the wine being a good vintage, then went to the cellar. She thought nothing of it at the time. She's used to him being in charge, giving orders. But when Eleanor died, and the police started asking about the tart, she remembered that moment and got scared. Says she didn't want to cause trouble for the master. Dolly Bantry set her cup down, her voice eager, scared. Poor girl, caught between her duty and the truth. Jane, you were so gentle with her at the whole. She opened up to you a bit. Do you think she's telling everything now, or is there more? Miss Marple's eyes narrowed slightly, her voice thoughtful. Lily's like a bird, Dolly frightened, ready to fly at the slightest noise. She's told what she thinks is safe, but fear holds her back. In my village, there was a maid who saw her mistress hide a letter but kept silent, thinking it wasn't her place. Lily's seen something perhaps more than Gerald by the tart. We must tread softly, or she close up entirely. Bantry nodded, warming to the thread. The inspector's trying to do just that. He spoke to Lily alone, away from the hall, at her mother's cottage. That's when she admitted seeing Gerald by the counter. She also said something else less clear, but telling. She mentioned the kitchen felt wrong that afternoon, like someone had been there who shouldn't. She couldn't pin it down, no stranger, no specific person, but she felt watched. She said, the inspector thinks it's nerves, but he's not dismissing it. Dr. Haydock rubbed his chin, his voice measured. A feeling's not evidence, but it's a signal. Lily's young, impressionable, but she's in the thick of it sees. The house holds rhythms. If she felt watched, maybe someone was in the kitchen, lurking, readying, perhaps, or even Clara, back after she left, or Gerald, earlier than she. Realized, what's her relationship with the others? Any hint she's protecting someone? Bantry flipped a page in his notebook. Lily's closest to Mrs. Baxter, who's kind but strict. She's shy with Clara, who intimidates her. Tom Reed, she barely knows he's outside most of the time. Redding's the one who stands out. The village gossip about her liking him. Is true she blushes when his name comes up, says he's kind, talks to her about his paintings, but she swears he wasn't in the kitchen that afternoon, not that she saw. Gerald's the one she's scared of, not physically, but his authority. She says he's always watching, always knows what's going on. Raymond West leaned forward, his pencil still. That's telling. Gerald's control over the house, it's like a net, holding everyone in place. Lily's caught in it, too scared to break free. But this kitchen moment, it's the first solid link to Gerald. The strychnine was in the custard, mixed before. Baking, but could he have added a final dose? Or ensured Eleanor got the poisoned slice? Bantry shook his head. The lab's clear the strychnine was evenly mixed in the custard, not added later. Gerald's pause by the tart couldn't have been to poison it, unless he tampered earlier, when the custard was in the bowl. But Lily's story puts him in the right place at the wrong time. The inspector's looking at it, but they need more of strychnine, a motive beyond the will, something concrete. Miss Marple's needles clicked once, then stopped. A place and a time, she murmured. In my village, there was a man who stood by a gate every evening. Said he was waiting for his dog, but he was watching a neighbor's window. It's not the standing that matters, but the why. Lily's tale is a window, Colonel, but we must look through it carefully. What else did she say about that afternoon? Anyone else near the tart, or acting oddly? Bantry consulted his notebook, puffing on his pipe. Lily's vague on others. She said Clara was quiet, focused on her jam, didn't touch the custard. Mrs. Baxter was her usual self, barking orders. Tom Reed was in and out, but only briefly. Reading she didn't see, though she admitted he sometimes wandered the corridors. The only odd thing, besides Gerald, was that watched feeling. She mentioned a shadow by the back door once, around 5, but thought it was just the wind moving the curtains. The inspector checked no sign of an intruder, but the back door was unlocked. Dolly Bantry clasped her hands, her voice eager. A shadow, that's so eerie. Maybe it was the poisoner, sneaking in to check the tart, or reading, spying for his own reasons. Jane, what do you make of it? Miss Marple smiled, her eyes twinkling. Shadows are tricks of the light, Dolly, but they point to something real. Lily's fear is her truth. She saw Gerald, felt watched, sensed wrongness. She's not lying, but she's not free to speak all she knows. In my village, a girl once hid her brother's theft because she loved him. Lily's not hiding love, I think, but fear of Gerald, perhaps, or of what she might have to face if she speaks. Dr. Haydock nodded slowly. Fear's a powerful silencer. Lily's testimony puts Gerald in the kitchen, but it's not enough for the police. They need the strychnine source, where it came from, how it got to the custard. Gerald's the likely candidate, with his old cases, but Lily's tale suggests he was bold, pausing by the tart in plain sight. That's either arrogance or innocence. Raymond West grinned, closing his notebook. Arrogance, I'd say. Gerald's playing the perfect widower, but Lily's cracked his facade. She's the weak link in his control. We need her to say more, maybe. About readying, or that shadow. What's next, Aunt Jane? Bantry set his pipe down, his face thoughtful. The inspector's planning to talk to Lily again, gently, maybe with a woman officer, to put her at ease. He's also digging into Gerald's past old clients, estates with medical supplies. I'll keep my ear to the ground at the club. Someone might have seen Lily with Redding, or heard about Gerald's movements. Miss Marple folded her knitting, her voice calm but firm. Lily's tale is a step, my dears, but not the path's end. She's shown us Gerald by the tart, but the why and how are still shadows. We must watch, listen, let her fear guide us. The truth is like a shy creature, it comes when you're still. The fire crackled, and the Tuesday nightclub leaned back, Lily's halting words echoing in their minds, a fragile bridge to the truth hidden in the heart of Benham Hall. Chapter 9. The Tuesday nightclub reconvenes. A sharp November wind rattled the windows of Miss Jane Marple's cottage in St. Mary Mead. The village cloaked in the deepening dusk of late autumn. Inside, the sitting room glowed with the familiar warmth of a crackling fire, its light dancing across the chintz curtains and the polished surfaces of oak furniture. The air carried the comforting scent of Earl Grey tea and the subtle sweetness of freshly baked scones, set out on a silver tray by Miss Marple's diligent housekeeper. Miss Marple herself, her white hair neatly coiled and her eyes alight with quiet perspicacity, sat in her accustomed armchair, her knitting needles weaving their ceaseless rhythm through the ever-lengthening pink shawl. Her presence, serene yet incisive, anchored the Tuesday nightclub as they gathered to unravel the tangled threads of the much Benham poisoning. The death of Eleanor Pritchard, felled by a strychnine-laced fruit tart, had consumed the club's discussions, each meeting peeling back layers of suspicion around the inhabitants of Benham Hall. Gerald Pritchard's calculated charm, Mrs. Baxter's fierce kitchen pride, Lily Carter's trembling fear, Tom Reed's silent reserve, Lawrence Redding's guarded allure, and Clara Pritchard's burdened loyalty had all come under scrutiny. Miss Marple and Dolly Bantry's visit to much Benham had illuminated the household's undercurrents, while Clara's half-confessed knowledge of Eleanor's will and Lily's revelation of Gerald's presence near the tart had sharpened the focus on the widower. Tonight, the club reconvened to synthesize these fragments, hoping to glimpse the pattern Miss Marple so patiently sought. Colonel Bantry, standing by the mantelpiece with a glass of whisky in hand, surveyed the group with the air of a commander rallying his troops. His moustache quivered, betraying his eagerness to advance the case. "We've been at this much Benham affair for weeks," he said, his voice resonant with purpose, "and we've gathered a fair bit thanks to Miss Marple and Dolly's sleuthing, and Lily's tale about Gerald in the kitchen. We're closing in, I reckon, but it's still a devil of a puzzle. I've got no new reports from the inspector this time. But I say we lay out what we know, Tart. Will, Gerald's paws, all of it tanned, see if we can't pin the tail on the donkey. Miss Marple, you've been quiet, but I'll wager you've got a theory brewing." Dolly Bantry nestled in a cushioned chair with a scone poised halfway to her lips, leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Oh, Arthur, it's thrilling, isn't it? Like a jigsaw with half the pieces turned upside down. Jane, you were so clever with Lily," she practically pointed at Gerald. "I keep thinking of him by that tart, so calm, and poor Eleanor eating it, not knowing. Do you think he's our man?" Dr. Haydock, seated on the sofa with his hands clasped, nodded thoughtfully, his medical mind seeking precision. "Lily's testimony is a breakthrough," he said, his tone measured. "Gerald near the tart, Clara's hint about the will, Redding's talk of jealousy, it's all pointing to Gerald, but we're missing the linchpin. The strychnine sauce, for one, and how he ensured only Eleanor ate it. Let's piece it together. Bantry wants the full picture." Raymond West, lounging in an armchair with a notebook balanced on his knee, twirled his pencil, his writer's flair undimmed. "I've been saying Gerald's the one," he declared, grinning. "Lily's tale seals adhes in the kitchen. The will's a motive, and his dislike of sweets is too perfect. But I want to hear Aunt Jane's take. She's been knitting away, seeing things we don't. Lay it out, Colonel, then let's hear from the master sleuth." Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, her gaze resting on the fire, but her mind was a whirl of connections, each detail a thread in a tapestry only she could fully see. Lily's fear, Clara's silence, Gerald's pause by the tart, they were not mere facts, but glimpses of human nature, the kind she had observed in St. Mary Mead's quiet lanes. She said nothing yet, her silence a gentle invitation for the others to lay their cards on the table, knowing the truth would emerge from the interplay of their perspectives. Colonel Bantry took a sip of whisky, then set the glass down and began. his hands clasped behind his back. Right, let's summarize the case as it stands. Eleanor Pritchard, 43, dies October 21st at Benham Hall after eating a fruit tart laced with strychnine. The poisons in the custard, mixed before baking, no trace anywhere else. Gerald Pritchard, her husband, 45, doesn't touch the tart, says he dislikes sweets a habit the household confirms. The police think the poison was meant for him, some grudge from his solicitor days, but they've no solid leads. We've got a different angle, thanks to our digging. He paced a step, warming to his role. The household's our focus. Mrs. Baxter, the cook, made the tartapores, blackberries, custard topping. She mixed the custard around 3, left it in a bowl, poured it into the pastry, baked it, and set it to cool on the counter from 4 to 7. She swears it was untouched, but she was busy, pantry, roast vegetables. Clara Pritchard was in the kitchen, stirring jam, alone with the custard for 5 minutes. Lily Carter, the maid, was in and out, fetching water, setting plates. Tom Reed, the gardener, dropped off herbs, stayed by the door. Lawrence Redding, the artist, was in the drawing room, though seen in the corridor. And Gerald Lilly says he was by the tart around 6, fetching wine but pausing near the counter. Dolly Bantry set her scone down, her voice eager. That pause, it's so suspicious, Arthur. Gerald, right there, with the tart cooling, and then Eleanor eats it and dies. It can't be coincidence, can it? Jane, you said, pauses. Us what you think. Bantry held up a hand, continuing. Let's keep to the facts. Motives, the next piece. Eleanor was planning to change her will, cut Gerald out, leave her fortune to a cousin. Redding overheard her arguing with Gerald about his flirtations with a widow, and Clara confirmed Eleanor told her the same. Gerald inherits Eleanor's money now, a tidy sum, though he's already wealthy. Clara, dependent on Gerald, had reason to worry about the will, but her guilt seems more about silence than action. Redding's got no clear motive, just jealousy over his charm, especially with Lily. Mrs. Baxter and Tom have no stake, and Lily's too scared to be a player. Dr. Haydock rubbed his chin, his voice precise. The will's the strongest motive, and it points to Gerald. Clara's knowledge of it implicates her, but only as a witness or accomplice. The strychnine's the gap. Where did it come from? Gerald's old cases, maybe, but we need evidence. And how did he know Eleanor would eat the tart? His dislike of sweets is convenient, but is it genuine? Raymond West leaned forward, his pencil tapping his notebook. That's where Lily's tale comes in. Gerald by the tart calm as you please, minutes before it's served. He didn't need to poison it, then the strychnine was already in the custard, but his presence screams intent. Maybe he was checking his work, making sure the tart looked normal. I say he mixed the poison earlier, when the custard was in the bowl, and used his wine errand as a cover to check. Bantry nodded, his eyes narrowing. That's a theory, Raymond, and it fits. The custard was unattended for short spells. Mrs. Baxter in the pantry, Clara stirring jam, Lily at the sink. Gerald was in the house, could have slipped in earlier. Stirred in the strychnine, Lily's story puts him in the kitchen later, which the police missed at first. But we're still short on proof. Where's the strychnine from, and how did he get it? Miss Marple's needles paused, her voice soft but clear. Proof is a stubborn thing, Colonel, but it follows patterns. In my village, there was a man who stole apples, and we caught him because he always took the reddest ones. Mr. Pritchard. Pause by the tart is like choosing the reddest apple. It's deliberate, even if we don't see the theft. Lily's fear, Clara's silence. The will, they all point to a man who knows more than he shows. But let's consider the tart itself. It was meant for two, yet only one ate. Why was Gerald so certain he wouldn't? The room fell quiet, her words sinking in like a stone in a still pond. Dolly Bantry clasped her hands, her voice eager. Jane, you're saying Gerald planned it? He knew he wouldn't eat the tart, so he poisoned it for Eleanor. Oh, it's so cold-blooded. But how did he get the strychnine? And why not just divorce her? Dr. Haydock leaned back, his brow furrowed. Divorce is messy, public, poisons. Quiet, if you're clever. Gerald's a solicitor, knows how to cover tracks. The strychnine's likely from an old estate he handled. Some had medical supplies, rat poisons. But Miss Marple's right is certainty about the tart is the key. He didn't just avoid sweets. He made sure Eleanor took the fatal bite. How did he serve her himself? Bantry shook his head, consulting his memory. Lily served the tart, cut slices for both. Eleanor took hers. Eagerly she loved Mrs. Baxter's desserts. Gerald passed, said he wasn't hungry for sweets. It's a habit, but Miss Marple's question nags. How did he know it had worked that night? Did he tamper with the tart to ensure only Eleanor's slice was poisoned? Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. Not the slice, I think, but the plan. In my village, there was a woman who baked cakes for her husband, but she always tasted them first, to be sure they were good. Eleanor's love of tarts was her weakness, and Gerald knew it. The strychnine was in the custard, evenly mixed, but the poisoner needed only one victim. Gerald's pause, his dislike of sweetsits, a performance, isn't it? Like a conjurer, distracting the audience. Raymond West grinned, his notebook forgotten a performancy. That's it, Aunt Jane Gerald's. The conjurer, waving his wine bottle, while the real trick's already done. He poisoned the custard earlier, maybe when Mrs. Baxter was in the pantry, and played the innocent widower after. Lily's tale catches him in the act, or close to it. But Claraara's silence is still a puzzle. Is she protecting him, or just blind to his guilt? Bantry rubbed his chin, his voice thoughtful. Clara's the sticking point. The vicar says she's tormented, praying for forgiveness, but she won't betray Gerald. She knew about the will, was in the kitchen, could have seen Gerald near the custard. Her guilt's about what she didn't say. Maybe she suspects him, but can't face it. Lily's fear points the same way Gerald's control over the house. Keeps them quiet. Dolly Bantry set her cup down, her voice eager. It's Gerald, isn't it? Jane, you've been leading us to him all along. Lily saw him by the tart. Clara knows about the will. Redding heard the row it all fits. But what about reading? He's so charming, could he be in on it, helping Gerald for a price? Dr. Haydock shook his head. Redding's a red herring. He's got no motive to kill. Eleanor, her jealousy was a nuisance, not a threat. His story about the will helps us, not him. He's a witness, stirring the pot, but not the poisoner. Gerald's our man, but we need the strychnine source to nail him. Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm, her voice calm but firm. Mr. Redding sees, but he doesn't act. He's like a mirror, reflecting the house's tensions. Lily's fear, Clara's silence, Gerald's pause. They're the real clues. In my village, there was a man who swore he never touched the cider. Yet his breath told another story. Gerald's breath, his certainty, his control betrays him. But the strychnine, as Dr. Haydock says, is the missing note in the tune. Bantry nodded, his eyes narrowing. The inspector's still chasing. That they've looked at Gerald's old cases. One estate had a stock of old medicines, including strychnine for vermin, but it's untraceable now. They're watching Gerald, but he's careful, grieving widower, pillar of the community. Lily's tale is their best lead, but it's not enough for an arrest. Raymond West leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. Then we push harder. Lily's scared, but she's talking. Clara's cracking under her guilt. If we could get one of them to say more, maybe, about Gerald's movements, or where he got the poison, we'd have him. Aunt Jane, you're the one to do it. You got Lily to open up before. Miss Marple smiled, folding her knitting. Gentleness opens doors, Raymond, but timing opens hearts. Lily's fear is her lock, Clara's loyalty her chain. We must wait for them to turn the key themselves. In my village, a woman kept silent about her husband's cruelty until a kind word broke her reserve. Gerald's performance is flawless, but no performance lasts forever. Dolly Bantry clasped her hands, her voice eager. Oh, Jane, you're marvelous. It's like watching a play unfold. What do we do next? Should we go back to Much Benham, talk to Lily again, or Clara? Or Reading? He might know more about Gerald's widow friend. Bantry set his glass down, his face thoughtful. I'll have a word with the inspector, see if they've squeezed more out of Lily or Clara. The Much Benham club's still buzzing. Someone might have heard about Gerald's dealings, or that strychnine stash. Miss Marple, you've got us on the Centini suggestions. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed behind her spectacles. Watch the small things, Colonel. A pause, a glance, a word too carefully chosen. Gerald's certainty is his weakness, and Lily and Clara are its cracks. Let's meet again, and perhaps the pattern will be clear. The fire crackled, and the Tuesday nightclub leaned back, the weight of Gerald's shadow settling over them, a promise of truth waiting to break through. The carefully woven lies of Benham Hall. Chapter 10. The misdirection. The November chill had tightened its grip on St. Mary Mead. The village's cottages huddled against the frosty dusk as if guarding their secrets. Inside Miss Jane Marple's sitting room, the Tuesday nightclub gathered. In the familiar glow of firelight, the warmth of the hearth a stark contrast to the cold calculations of the Much Benham mystery. The air was fragrant with the scent of chamomile tea and the subtle sweetness of almond biscuits, arranged on a delicate porcelain tray. Miss Marple, her white hair a soft halo under the lamplight, sat in her armchair, her knitting needles weaving their quiet rhythm through the cascading pink shawl. Her eyes, bright with a serene yet piercing clarity, seemed to see beyond the room, tracing the intricate web of the poisoning at Benham Hall, the club's relentless pursuit of the truth behind. Eleanor Pritchard's death struck down by a strychnine-laced fruit tart had drawn a tightening circle around. Gerald Pritchard, the revelations of Lily Carter's fear, Clara Pritchard's burdened silence, Lawrence Redding's observant charm, and the looming motive of Eleanor's threatened will had painted Gerald as a man of calculated intent. The previous meeting had crystallized their suspicions. With Lily's account of Gerald's pause by the tart and Clara's guilt-ridden reticence, pointing to a carefully orchestrated crime. Tonight, the club sought to unravel the final threads, guided by Miss Marple's unringed instinct for the human heart's deceptions. Colonel Bantry, standing by the mantelpiece with a pipe clenched between his teeth, puffed thoughtfully, his moustache quivering with the weight of their progress. "We're closing in on this Much Benham business," he said, his voice carrying the gravitas of a seasoned strategist. Gerald's in the crosshairs, Lily's tale of him by the tart. Clara's knowledge of the will, Redding's hints of Eleanor's jealousy. It's a devilish clever setup, but we're not quite there. I've got no fresh word from the inspector this time, but I say we take Miss Marple's lead and look at the misdirection. Gerald's playing a game, and we need to see through his sleight of hand. What say you, Miss Marple? Dolly Bantry, curled in a chin-scovered chair, with a teacup cradled in her hands, leaned forward, her eyes alight with excitement. Oh, Arthur, it's like a magic trick, isn't it? Gerald, all charming and grieving, while he's pulling strings behind the curtain. Jane, you were so brilliant last time, pointing to his certainty. I keep thinking of him by that tart, so calm, knowing Eleanor would eat it. Is he our conjurer, do you think? Dr. Haydock, seated on the sofa with his arms crossed, nodded, his medical mind seeking the precise mechanism of the crime. Misdirection's the key, he said, his tone measured. Gerald's dislike of sweets, his pause in the kitchen. The police thinking the poison was for Himmets, all staged to shift focus. But we need the how and why nailed down. The strychnine source, for one, and how he ensured Eleanor was the victim. Lay out the theory, Bantry, let's test it. Raymond West, lounging in an armchair with a notebook balanced on his knee, twirled his pencil, his writer's flair undimmed. I've been calling Gerald the villain since we started, he declared, grinning. Lily's tale, Clara's silence it. A performance, like Aunt Jane said. He's the conjurer, waving his wine bottle while the poison's already in play. But I want to hear how he did it, step by step. What's the misdirection, Colonel? And Aunt Jane, what's the trick? Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, her gaze resting on the fire. But her mind was a kaleidoscope of connections, each detail a facet of a truth she was beginning to discern. Gerald's pause, Lily's fear, Clara's guilt, they were not merely clues but reflections of a deeper deception, one rooted in the quiet certainties of human behavior. She remained silent, her presence a gentle catalyst, inviting the others to lay out their thoughts before she wove them into a pattern. Colonel Bantry lit his pipe, the fragrant smoke curling upward as he began. Let's map the trick, as Miss Marple calls it. The crime's simple on the surface. Eleanor Pritchard dies October 21st at Benham Hall, poisoned by strychnine in a fruit tart's custard. Gerald, her husband, doesn't eat it, citing his dislike of sweets, a habit the household knows. The police think the poison was meant for him, some grudge from his solicitor days, but we've seen through that. Gerald's the prime suspect, with motive, opportunity, and a performance to rival a West End show. He paced a step, warming to his narrative. Motive first. Eleanor was set to change her will, cutting Gerald out, leaving her fortune to a cousin. Redding overheard her arguing with Gerald about his flirtations, and Clara confirmed Eleanor told her the same. Gerald inherits now, keeping his wealth and freedom. That's the why money, control, maybe even a new life with this widow Redding mentioned. Opportunities next. Lily saw Gerald in the kitchen around 6, pausing by the tart, supposedly fetching wine. The strychnine was in the custard, mixed before baking. So he must have tampered earlier when Mrs. Baxter was in the pantry, say, or Clara was distracted with jam. Dolly Bantry set her cup down, her voice eager. That pause, it's so chilling. Arthur, Gerald, standing there, knowing the tart's deadly, and then letting Lily carry it to Eleanor. It's like he's directing a play. Jane, you said it's a performance. How did he pull it off? Bantry held up a hand, continuing. The misdirections, the genius of it. Gerald's dislike of sweets is the cornerstone, everyone knows it. From Mrs. Baxter to Lily, the police assume the poison was for him. A botched attempt by an enemy, because who'd poison a tart he won't eat? That's the first slight. He makes himself the target, not the killer. The second is his behavior: calm, grieving, cooperative. He's the perfect widower, fooling the police and the village. Lily's tale cracks that facade, placing him by the tart, but even then, he's covered fetching wine, innocent errand. Dr. Haydock leaned forward, his brow furrowed. It's a tight plan, but the strychnine's the weak link. Where did he get it? His old cases, maybe estates with rat poison, medical supplies, but we need proof. And how did he mix it in the custard without Mrs. Baxter noticing? She's territorial, sharp-eyed. He'd need a moment alone, a nerve to spare. Raymond West tapped his pencil, his eyes gleaming. Nerves, no issue. Gerald's a solicitor, used to playing angles. Picture it. Mrs. Baxter steps to the pantry. Clara's stirring jam. Lily's at the sink. Gerald slips in, maybe earlier than Lily saw, stirs strychnine into the custard bowl. It's quick seconds, not minutes. The vanilla and sugar mask the bitterness, and the baking hides the rest. Then he plays his part, pauses by the tart later, lets Lily see him, knowing she's too scared to talk. It's bold, but it works. Bantry nodded, puffing on his pipe. That's the theory, and it holds water. The custard was unattended. For short spells, Mrs. Baxter in the pantry for 5 minutes. Clara focused on jam, Lily fetching water. Gerald was in the house, free to move. His pause by the tart, as Miss Marple said, is the red apple, the deliberate act that betrays intent. But we're missing the strychnine sauce, and Clara's role nags at me. She's guilty, but of what? Helping Gerald, or just suspecting him? Miss Marple's needles paused, her voice soft but precise. A conjurer's trick relies on the audience, Colonel. Gerald's audience is the household, Mrs. Baxter's pride, Lily's fear, Clara's loyalty. They see what he wants them to see, a man who dislikes sweets, a grieving husband, but Clara. She's not just watching, she's part of the act, whether she knows it or not. In my village, there was a woman who stood by while her son cheated. At cards, not playing, but not stopping him. Clara's silence is her card, and it's played for Gerald. Dolly Bantry gasped, her hands clasped. Jane, you mean Clara helped him? Not with the poison, but by keeping quiet. Oh, it's so tragica. Love for Gerald, making her complicit. But how did he know she'd stay silent? Dr. Haydock rubbed his chin, his voice measured. Clara's devotion is Gerald's shield. She knew about the will, was in the kitchen, saw him pass through. If she suspected he tampered with the custard, her loyalty would keep her quiet, not to aid murder, but to protect her brother. Gerald counted on that, just as he counted on Lily's fear and Mrs. Baxter's pride. It's a psychological trap, not just a poison. Raymond West leaned forward, his notebook forgotten. That's the misdirection, Gerald's. Not just poisoning Eleanor, he's poisoning the household's trust. He uses their weaknesses against them. Clara's love, Lily's timidity, Redding's detachment. Even the police fall for it, chasing a phantom enemy. But Aunt Jane, how do we prove it? Lily's tale's not enough, and Clara's not talking. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. Proof follows the pattern, Raymond. Gerald's trick is his certainty, Lonor's love of tarts, his own avoidance, the household's habits. But certainty breeds carelessness. In my village, a thief was caught because he always hid his loot in the same barn. Gerald's barn is his control, and Lily's tale is the crack in its wall. We must look at his moments when he was alone, what he touched, what he said. Bantry puffed on, his pipe, his eyes narrowing. Let's trace those moments. Gerald's in the study most of the afternoon, joins Eleanor in the drawing room before dinner. Lily sees him in the kitchen around 6, pausing by the tart. Clara places him there earlier, fetching wine. Mrs. Baxter was distracted. Lily at the sink, Clara at the jam. Earlier still, the custards in a bowl. Mrs. Baxter steps to the pantry. Clara's stirring, Lily's out. Gerald could have slipped in then, stirred in the strychnine. It's tight, but possible. Dolly Bantry set her cup down, her voice eager. Possible. It's more than that, Arthur, it's likely. Gerald, sneaking in, stirring poison, then acting the innocent. But what about reading? He's so observant. Did he see anything? Or is he just a bystander, like Jane said? Dr. Haydock shook his head. Reading's a mirror, as Miss Marple put it. He sees the tensions Eleanor's jealousy. Flirtations, but he's no player. His story about the will helps us, not Gerald. If he suspected Gerald, he'd have told the police more, unless he's protecting someone. But who? Not Lily, she's too minor. Clara, maybe, but that's a stretch. Raymond West grinned, his eyes gleaming. Reading's the audience, clapping for Gerald's show. But Lily and Clara the weak spots. Lily's talking now, and Clara's cracking under guilt. If we could get Clara to admit what she saw, maybe Gerald by the custard, not just the tart, we'd have him. Aunt Jane, you're the one to charm her. Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm, her voice calm but firm. Charm opens doors, Raymond, but truth opens hearts. Clara's loyalty is her prison, and Lily's fear her cage. Gerald's misdirection is his strength, but it's also his flaw. In my village, a man lied about his debts, but his wife's tears gave him away. Gerald's household is his wife, and their silence is breaking. Bantry set his pipe down, his face thoughtful. You're right, Miss Marple, the silence is cracking. Lily's tale is the first breach, and Clara's guilt the second. The inspector's watching Gerald, but they need more proof of strychnine, a witness who'll speak plainly. They're digging into his old cases. One had a stock of vermin poison, unaccounted for. If they link it to him, Lily's story could tip the scale. Dolly Bantry clasped her hands, her voice eager. Oh, Jane, it's coming together. Gerald's, the poisoner using everyone's trust against them. But what do we do next? Should we go back to Benham, talk to Clara or Lily? Or maybe the inspector needs a nudge. Dr. Haydock leaned back, his brow furrowed. We're close, but Gerald's clever. He's left no fingerprints, no poison vial. Lily's testimony is circumstantial, and Clara's silence is her choice. We need a break, either the strychnine source or a confession. Miss Marple's right about the pattern. Gerald's control is his weakness. If we can shake Lily or Clara's trust in him, they might speak. Miss Marple smiled, folding her knitting. A pattern is like a tune. My dears, you hear it when the notes align. Gerald's tune is his certainty, but the household's discord is growing. Lily's fear, Clara's guilt, Reading's mirror there, the notes we need. In my village, a liar was caught when his dog barked at the wrong time. We must listen for Gerald's bark, and it will come. Bantry nodded, his eyes gleaming. You're a marvel, Miss Marple. I'll press the inspector for more, maybe a word with Lily. or Clara, or news on that strychnine. The much Benham clubs still chattering someone might have seen Gerald with that widow, or heard about his cases. What's our next move? Miss Marple's eyes gleamed behind her spectacles. Watch the discord, Colonel. Gerald's misdirection is his stage, but the audience is restless. Let's meet again, and perhaps the curtain will rise on the truth. The fire crackled, and the Tuesday nightclub leaned back. The shadow of Gerald's deception looming large, its cracks widening. With each note of doubt, a promise of revelation in the quiet drama of Benham Hall. Chapter 11. The confrontation. The November frost had painted the windows of St. Mary Mead with intricate lace. The village hushed under a sky heavy with the promise of snow. Inside Miss Jane Marple's cottage, the Tuesday nightclub gathered. In the familiar warmth of her sitting room, where the fire's glow softened the edges of polished wood and floral upholstery. The air was fragrant with the scent of lapsang souchong tea and the faint sweetness of ginger biscuits, arranged on a delicate tray. Miss Marple, her white hair a gentle crown under the lamplight, sat in her armchair, her knitting needles tracing their quiet rhythm through the sprawling pink shawl. Her eyes, bright with a serene yet incisive clarity, seemed to pierce the veil of the much Benham mystery. Now poised on the brink of resolution, the club's relentless pursuit of the truth. Behind Eleanor Pritchard's death, felled by a strychnine-laced fruit tart, had woven a damning tapestry around Gerald Pritchard. Lily Carter's fearful account of his pause by the tart, Clara Pritchard's guilt-laden silence, Lawrence Redding's observant reflections, and the motive of Eleanor's threatened will had exposed Gerald's calculated deception. The previous meeting had crystallized their theory. Gerald, the conjurer, had orchestrated a misdirection, using his known dislike of sweets and the household's trust to poison Eleanor while deflecting suspicion. Tonight, the club learned of a confrontation that promised to crack Gerald's facade, guided by Miss Marple's unerring instinct for the subtle fractures in human facades. Colonel Bantry, standing by the mantelpiece with a glass of brandy in hand, surveyed the group with the air of a general reporting a decisive maneuver. His moustache quivered, betraying his excitement at the latest development. "We've been hounding this much Benham case like a pack of beagles," he said, his voice rich with conviction, "and by Jove, we're nearly at the kilt. Gerald's, our man Lily's tale, Clara's silence, the Willets all but nailed. Him, I've just had word from Inspector Crane, who's taken our nudges to heart. There's been a confrontation at Benham Hall, and it's shaken things loose. Let's lay it out and see if we can't close the net." Dolly Bantry, nestled in a cushioned chair with a teacup poised, leaned forward, her eyes wide with anticipation. "A confrontation. Oh, Arthur, it's like the climax of a play. I can just see Gerald, all smooth and charming, facing the inspector's questions. Jane, you've been leading us to this Gerald's performance crumbling. What happened? Did Lily or Clara finally speak?" Dr. Haydock, seated on the sofa with his hands clasped, nodded, his medical mind seeking the precise mechanics of the breakthrough. "A confrontation's the spark we needed," he said, his tone measured. "Gerald's control has kept Lily scared and Clara silent, but pressure cracks even the strongest facade. The strychnine's source is still elusive, but if someone's talked, it could be the linchpin." "What's the news, Bantry? Who faced Gerald, and what came of it?" Raymond West, lounging in an armchair with a notebook on his knee, twirled his pencil, his writer's flair alight with drama. "I knew Gerald's act wouldn't hold forever," he declared, grinning. "Lily's tale was the first chink, guilt the second. A confrontation's the curtain callant. Jane's been directing us to this all along. Spill it, Colonel. What's the showdown? And did Gerald crack? Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, her gaze resting on the fire. But her mind was a mosaic of connections, each detail a tile in a pattern now nearing completion. Gerald's pause, Lily's fear, Clara's silence, they were not mere clues, but echoes of a deeper truth, one rooted in the quiet betrayals of trust. She remained silent, her presence a gentle catalyst, inviting Bantry to unfold the latest act in their drama. Knowing her moment to weave the threads would come, Colonel Bantry took a sip of brandy, then set the glass down and began, his hands clasped behind his back. Right, let's set the stage. The inspector's been circling Gerald for weeks, thanks to our prodding Lily's account of him by the tart, Clara's hints about the will, Redding's talk of Eleanor's threats. They've been digging into Gerald's past, chasing that strychnine, and yesterday they moved. Inspector Crane called Gerald to the much Benham station, not for a friendly chat, but a proper grilling, with Lily's testimony and Clara's evasions on the table. It wasn't a formal arrest, mind you, but a calculated push to see if he'd buckle. He paced a step, warming to his narrative. Crane laid it out plain. Lily saw Gerald by the tart, pausing, not just fetching wine. Clara knew Eleanor was set to change her will, cutting Gerald out. Redding heard the row about Gerald's flirtations with a widow, Mrs. Langleyno, kin to Miss Marple's friend. The police found a lead on the strychnine old estate Gerald handled 2 years ago had a stock of vermin, poison, including strychnine, unaccounted for after the sale. It's not proof, but it's close. They put it to Gerald. Did he take the poison, mix it in the custard, knowing Eleanor would eat the tart and he wouldn't? Dolly Bantry gasped, her teacup clinking against its saucer. Oh, Arthur, that's bold, confronting him like that, with all those pieces. I can just see Gerald's face smooth as silk, trying to talk his way out. Did he deny it, or did he slip up? Bantry held up a hand, continuing. Gerald's no fool. He kept his cool, played the grieving widower to a T, denied everything, set his paws by the tart was nothing, just checking the dinner set-up. Swore he never touched the custard, never saw strychnine, never knew about the will until after Eleanor's death. Claimed Lily's mistaken, nervous, seeing things that weren't there. As for Clara, he said she's overwrought, imagining threats Eleanor never meant. The estate poison, pure coincidence. He says he handled dozens of properties, never kept anything. Crane pushed hard, but Gerald didn't crack, not yet. Dr. Haydock leaned forward, his brow furrowed. He's slippery, but pressure's building. Lily's testimonies, shaky, she's scared, but it places him at the scene. Clara's silence is louder than words, and that strychnine leads a noose tightening. Did Gerald show any nerves? A crack in the mask? Bantry nodded, his eyes narrowing. Crane said Gerald was calm to calm, like a man who's rehearsed his lines. But there was a moment, when Lily's name came up, that his eyes flicked just for a second. Crane caught it, thinks Gerald's worried Lily might say more, and Clara. Gerald was quick to dismiss her, said she's fragile, needs protecting. That's telling, isn't it? He's still controlling the narrative, but the inspector's not buying it. Raymond West tapped his pencil, his eyes gleaming. That's the misdirection starting to fray. Gerald's been banking on Lily's fear and Clara's loyalty, but they're wobbling. Lily's already talked, and Clara's guilt's eating her alive. If Crane can get one of them to break, say, Clara admitting she saw Gerald by the custard earlier. We've got him. What's the inspector's next move? Miss Marple's needles paused, her voice soft but precise. A flick of the eyes. Colonel, how revealing. In my village, there was a man who swore he never touched the church plate. But his glance at the vestry gave him away. Mr. Pritchard's control is his strength, but it's brittle. Lily's fear, Clara's guilt there. The cracks he can't mend. What did the inspector do with Lily and Clara after the confrontation? Bantry glanced at her, a spark of admiration in his eyes. You're sharp as ever, Miss Marple. Crane didn't stop with Gerald. He brought Lily in separately, at her mother's cottage, with a woman officer to keep her calm. She stuck to her. Story Gerald, by the tart, pausing, combat wouldn't add more. She's terrified, says Gerald's always watching, even now. Crane thinks she's holding back. Maybe saw Gerald earlier, near the custard bowl, but she's not ready to say. As for Clara, they spoke to her at her cottage. She's a mespel, praying, talking about sin. She admitted knowing about the will, said Eleanor was serious, but swore she never told Gerald. When they asked if she saw him in the kitchen beyond, the wine errant, she froze, said she couldn't betray her brother. Crane's sure she's hiding something specific. Dolly Bantry set her cup down, her voice eager. Clara's cracking. Oh, Jane, it's just as you said, her loyalties, her prison. If she saw Gerald by the custard, not just the tart, it's over for him. And Lily, poor thing, so scared. Can't the police protect her, get her to talk? Dr. Haydock rubbed his chin, his voice measured. Clara's the pivot now. Lily's testimony is circumstantial. Gerald can dismiss it as a maid's nerves. But Clara, with her family tie, her presence in the kitchen, if she confirms Gerald tampered with the custard, it's damning. The strychnine leads strong, but without a witness, it's just a shadow. What's Crane's plan to break them? Bantry puffed on his pipe, consulting his memory. Crane's playing it careful. He's keeping pressure on Gerald, watching him, checking his old cases, tracing that estate's poison. For Lily, they're building trust, talking to her mother, offering protection if she speaks. Clara's tougher, she's loyal to Gerald, sees him as her life's purpose. But the vicar's helping, says Clara's been at church daily, asking about forgiveness for silence. Crane's planning another talk with her, maybe with the vicar present, to nudge her conscience. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed slightly, her voice thoughtful. Conscience is a quiet voice, but persistent. In my village, a woman kept silent about her son's theft until the vicar asked her to pray for truth. Clara's praying, Colonel, and that's her truth breaking through. Lily's fear is her chain, but Clara's guilt is her key. If she speaks, Gerald's performance ends. Raymond West leaned forward, his notebook forgotten. That's it. Aunt Jane Claris, the linchpin. Gerald's counted on her silence, but she's crumbling. If she saw him by the custard, or even suspects he got the strychnine, it's checkmate. And Lily, she might back it up, if she feels safe. What about Redding? Any chance he's got more to say? Maybe about Gerald's widow friend, Bantry. Shook his head. Redding's on the sidelines now. Crane questioned him again, but he's sticking to his story. Heard the row, saw Eleanor's jealousy, nothing more. He's leaving much Benham soon, says the portrait's nearly done. The police think he's clean, just an observer, like Miss Marple said. The widow, Mrs. Langley, is a loose thread. They've talked to her, and she admits Gerald was friendly, but nothing improper. She's no motive, just a spark for Eleanor's anger. Dolly Bantry clasped her hands, her voice eager. It's all coming together. Gerald, poisoning the custard, using Clara's loyalty and Lily's fear to hide it. Jane, you've been weaving this net from the start. What do we do now? Should we go to Much Benham, help Clara speak? Dr. Haydock leaned back, his brow furrowed. We're close, but Gerald's still slippery. The strychnines, the missing piece, link it to him, and Clara's word seals it. Crane's on the right path, but he needs a break. Clara's confession, or Lily's full story. Miss Marple's right about conscious Clara's ready to crack, but it's delicate. Push too hard, and she clam up. Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm, her voice calm but firm. A crack lets in light, my dears, but it mustn't shatter the glass. Clara's conscience is her light, and Lily's fear her shadow. Gerald's performance is his stage, but the audience is turning. In my village, a liar was caught when his wife saw him hide a letter. Clara's seen Gerald's letter, his pause, his certainty, and she's ready to read it aloud. We must trust the inspector and the truth. Bantry set his glass down, his face thoughtful. You're a marvel, Miss Marple. Crane's got the bit between his teeth. He'll keep it Clara and Lily, and that strychnine leads warming up. I'll nudge him again, maybe talk to the vicar about Clara's state. The Much Benham club's still buzzing. Someone might have seen Gerald near that estate. Raymond West grinned, closing his notebook. It's the final act, and Gerald's. Out of tricks, Clara's guilt, Lily's fear, the strychnine all converging. Aunt Jane, you've directed this like a maestro. What's the encore? Miss Marple smiled, folding her knitting. The encore is truth, Raymond. Gerald's misdirection was his curtain, but Clara and Lily are raising it. Let's meet again, and perhaps the stage will be bare. The fire crackled, and the Tuesday nightclub leaned back, the weight of Gerald's unraveling deception settling. Over them, a promise of justice in the quiet drama of Benham Hall. Chapter 12. The fireside reflection, the winter's first snow-dusted St. Mary Mead, cloaking the village in a serene hush as the Tuesday nightclub convened in Miss Jane Marple's cottage. The sitting room, aglow with firelight, enveloped the group in warmth. Its chintz, curtains, and polished oak furnishings a familiar haven against the chill. The air was fragrant with the scent of peppermint tea and the delicate sweetness of lavender. Shortbread, set out on a silver tray by Miss Marple's attentive housekeeper. Miss Marple, her white hair a soft halo under the lamplight, sat in her armchair, her knitting needles tracing their gentle rhythm through the now voluminous pink shawl. Her eyes, bright with quiet wisdom, held a reflective calm, as if the Much Benham mystery, so long their focus, had settled into its final, revealing tableau. The poisoning of Eleanor Pritchard at Benham Hall, felled by a strychnine-laced fruit. Tart had been a labyrinth of deception, its threads Gerald Pritchard's calculated charm. Lily Carter's fearful testimony, Clara Pritchard's burdened silence, Lawrence Redding's observant detachment, and the looming motive of Eleanor's will woven into a damning case against Gerald. The club's persistence, guided by Miss Marple's unerring instinct, had culminated in a confrontation that cracked Gerald's facade, leading to his confession. Tonight, the club gathered not to unravel, but to reflect, to trace the path from suspicion to truth, and to savor the quiet triumph of justice. Served in the shadowed halls of Benham Hall, Colonel Bantry, standing by the mantelpiece with a glass of port in hand, surveyed the group with the air of a commander recounting a hard-won victory. His moustache quivered, betraying his satisfaction at their shared success. "Well, by Jove, we've done it," he declared, his voice rich with pride. "The Much Benham case is closed, and Gerald Pritchard's in irons, thanks to our dogged work and Miss Marple's uncanny knack for seeing through the fog. I've had the full report from Inspector Crane, and it's a tale worth telling. Let's lay it out, toast our triumph, and see what lessons we've learned before the next mystery comes knocking." Dolly Bantry, curled in a cushioned chair with a teacup cradled in her hands, leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with delight. "Oh, Arthur, it's like the end of a novel. Gerald, caught at last, and all because of Jane's brilliance. I still shiver thinking of him by that tart, so calm, while poor Eleanor ate her doom. Tell us everything, and Jane, you must say how you knew it was him from the start." Dr. Haydock, seated on the sofa with his legs crossed, nodded, his medical mind seeking the precise anatomy of their success. "It's a remarkable case," he said, his tone measured. "Gerald's misdirection was near perfect, his dislike of sweets, the police chasing a phantom enemy. But Lily's testimony, Clara's conscience, and that strychnine lead broke him. What's the final chapter, Bantry? How did the confession come, and what sealed it?" Raymond West, lounging in an armchair with a notebook closed on his knee, grinned, his writer's flair alight with the drama's resolution. "I called Gerald the villain early on, but Aunt Jane stole the show," he said, his eyes gleaming. "She saw the pattern Gerald's certainty, Clara's silence, Lily's fear. It's a masterclass in sleuthing. Lay out the finale, Colonel, and let's hear Aunt Jane's reflections. What's the fireside lesson?" Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, her gaze resting on the fire, but her mind was a quiet tapestry, each thread of the case now woven into a clear design. Gerald's confession, though a triumph, was to her merely the inevitable fruit of human nature's betrayals, certainty undone by doubt, control shattered by conscience. She remained silent, her presence a gentle anchor, inviting Bantry to recount the final act while she gathered her thoughts for the reflection to come. Colonel Bantry took a sip of port, then set the glass down and began, his hands clasped behind his back. "Let's set the scene. Gerald Pritchard, cornered by Inspector Crane's confrontation, held his ground, at first denied tampering with the tart, dismissed Lily's tale as nerves, swore he knew nothing of Eleanor's will. But the pressure was mounting. Lily's testimony placed him by the tart, Clara's evasions hinted at his motive, and the police found a lead on the strychnine old estate he'd handled, with a stock of vermin poison unaccounted for. Crane didn't arrest him then, but he kept the screws tight, watching Gerald, talking to Lily and Clara, digging deeper. He paced a step, warming to his narrative. The breakthrough came 2 days after the confrontation. Clara, racked by guilt, went to the vicar, Mr. Henshaw, and poured out her heart. She'd seen Gerald in the kitchen earlier than she'd admitted, not just at 6, fetching wine, but around 3, when the custard was in the bowl. He'd come in, said he was checking the cellar stock, but lingered by the counter near the custard when Mrs. Baxter was in the pantry. Clara didn't see him touch it, but his manner to calm, to deliberate stayed with her. When Eleanor died, she suspected but couldn't face it. The vicar, bless him, urged her to tell the police, and she did, in tears, saying she couldn't carry the sin of silence any more. Dolly Bantry gasped, her teacup clinking against its saucer. Clara spoke. "Oh, Jane, you said her conscience would break her. Gerald, by the custard, not just the tart, that's the proof we needed. Did she say more? Did she know about the strychnine?" Bantry held up a hand, continuing. Clara's testimony was the crack, but there's more. Lily, bolstered by the woman officer's kindness, added her own piece. She remembered Gerald in the kitchen earlier, too, around 3. Passing through with a small vial in his handglass, she thought, but she was too scared to look closely. She'd forgotten it in her panic, but Clara's confession jogged her. Memory, she said. Gerald smiled at her, told her to mind her work, and she felt that watched chill she'd mentioned. The police put it together. Gerald, vial in hand, by the custard, with Clara and Lily as witnesses. Dr. Haydock leaned forward, his brow furrowed. A vial, that's damning. Did they find it? And the strychnine from the estate, did they link it to Gerald? Bantry nodded, his eyes narrowing. The police searched Benham Hall again, with Clara's and Lily's statements in hand. They found no vial. Gerald's too clever for that, but they traced the estate's poison. A ledger from the sale, overlooked before, showed Gerald had access to the storeroom where the strychnine was kept. A groundskeeper recalled him taking samples for valuation, never returned. It's circumstantial, but with Clara and Lily's accounts, it's a noose. Crane brought Gerald in again, this time with the evidence stacked high. Raymond West leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. That's the curtain falling. Gerald, caught by his own household, Clara's conscience, Lily's memory. Did he confess then, or keep playing the widower? Bantry puffed on his pipe, his voice rich with satisfaction. Gerald held out at first, denied the vial, said Clara was hysterical, Lily mistaken. But Crane was relentless, slayed out the timeline. Gerald by the custard at 3, vial in hand, then by the tart at 6, ensuring his plan. The will motive, the strychnine led, the witnesses, it was too much. Gerald cracked, not with a shout, but a slump, like a man whose mask finally slipped. He confessed, voice flat, said Eleanor was suffocating him, her control, her jealousy, her will. He'd met a widow, Mrs. Langley, kind and undemanding, and saw a new life. He took the from the estate, stirred it into the custard when Mrs. Baxter was out, knowing Eleanor's love of tarts would seal her fate. His dislike of sweets was his shield, the police's theory his cloak. Dolly Bantry clasped her hands, her voice eager. He confessed. Oh, Jane, you were right, his certainty was his downfall. That widow, Mrs. Langley, she was his dream. Wasn't she? But how cruel, using Eleanor's love of tarts against her. Dr. Haydock rubbed his chin, his voice measured. It's a chilling, plant psychological as much as chemical. Gerald used the household's trust, Mrs. Baxter's pride, Lily's fear, Clara's loyalty. The strychnine was his tool, but his real weapon was control. What happened to Clara and Lily after? And Redding, did he add anything? Bantry nodded, consulting his memory. Clara's devastated, relieved to unburden her conscience, but broken by Gerald's betrayal. She's staying with the vicar's sister, away from the village's stairs. Lily's shaken but freer, her mother's keeping her close. The police are protecting them as witnesses for the trial. Redding's left much. Benham finished the portrait. Elsewhere, he told Crane he suspected Gerald's calm was too perfect but had no proof. He's a bystander, as Miss Marple said, a mirror, not a player. Miss Marple's needles paused, her voice soft but precise. A mirror reflects truth, but it doesn't act. Mr. Redding saw Gerald's performance, but Clara and Lily felt its weight. In my village, a man lied about his debts, but his wife's tears told the truth. Gerald's household was his wife, and their breaking silence was his unmasking. But tell me, Colonel, What did Gerald say of his heart? Why did he choose poison, not divorce? Bantry glanced at her, a spark of admiration in his eyes. You cut to the core, Miss Marple. Gerald said divorce was impossibly. Lenore's money was hers, and she'd afford him, ruined him socially. Poison was quiet, final. He spoke of Mrs. Langley as his salvation, but Crane thinks it was more about controls. Gerald couldn't bear Eleanor's dominance. He planned it for months, waiting for the right moment, using the tart as his stage. His confession was cold, no remorse, just regret at being caught. Dolly Bantry set her cup down, her voice soft. No remorse. How dreadful. Poor Eleanor, loving her tarts, never suspecting. Jane, you saw it all along, his certainty, his trick. How did you know? Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles, her voice calm but firm. I didn't know, Dolly, but I saw. People are the same, whether in St. Mary Mead or Benham. Hall. Gerald's certainty was his pause by the tart, his dislike of sweets, his calm. In my village, a man swore he never touched the cider, but his breath betrayed him. Gerald's breath was his control, and it faltered when Lily spoke, when Clara prayed. The heart always betrays. My dear, if you watch closely, Dr. Haydock leaned back, his brow furrowed. It's a masterclass in human nature. Gerald's plan was near perfect, but he couldn't control conscience. Clara's, Lily's, even his own, in the end. The strychnine was his tool, but the household's trust was his canvas. What's the lesson, Miss Marple? What do we take from this? Raymond West grinned, his eyes gleaming. The lessons aren't Jane's eye. She saw the pattern before we did. Gerald's misdirection, the household's silence, the tart's betrayal. It's a story for my next novel. But seriously, Aunt Jane, what's the fireside reflection? How do we spot the next Gerald? Miss Marple folded her knitting, her voice a quiet melody. The reflection is simple, Raymond. People weave their own nets, love, fear, loyalty. Gerald wove his with certainty, but nets fray when pulled. Clara's love, Lily's fear, Eleanor's trust, they frayed his. In my village, a thief was caught because his dog barked at night. Watch for the bark, the small thing, the wrong note. It's always there, if you listen. Bantry raised his glass, his face alight with pride. To Miss Marple, our maestro, and to the Tuesday nightclub for seeing it through. Crane sends his thanks, says we gave him the nudge he needed. What's next? Another puzzle, I hope. Dolly Bantry clapped her hands, her voice eager. Oh yes, another mystery, Jane. You've spoiled us for ordinary evenings. Who's got the next tale? Miss Marple smiled, her eyes gleaming. The world's full of tales, Dolly. People carry them in their hearts, and hearts always speak in time. Let's meet again and see what story comes. The fire crackled, and the Tuesday nightclub raised their cups, the triumph of Benham. Whole a warm ember in their minds, a quiet promise of mysteries yet to unfold in the gentle glow of Miss Marple's fireside.